everybody. You are so welcome to be with Brad Stein and Brad Stein Has Issues, where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. Tonight we have a screenwriter who has written numerous films, television scripts, and many faith-based, but some have a faith-based element. His name's Sean Paul Murphy. I've been in a couple films he's actually written, and we talk about that. So if you've ever wanted to be a screenwriter, if you ever wanted to be anything to do with the business of writing for television and or film, this guy's done it, and he's now going to teach you everything you need to know about it. Or if nothing else, you can be jealous that he's done something you'll never accomplish in your wildest dreams. If you are jumping on for the first time, fear not. You're not alone. Many times people stumble upon Brad Stein Has Issues because God called them to look this direction so that the rest of your life can feel even more meaningful when you get a load of us. My sidekick, I like to call him my sidekick, but also my producer, my director, my, my little minstrel, my little go-to guy for a little chemistry as we banter back and forth to make you guys think, oh, if we could be as clever as those guys. Happens also to be my son. His name is Wyatt Stein. Wyatt, good to have you. Thanks for showing up once again on a Monday night.
Is it Monday? I slept in. I don't remember.
It is. It's a Monday night, and this is the night that you and I put on our little show, our little skit, our little sketch, our little puppetry show. You know, we got a ventriloquist coming up soon, a very famous puppeteer or ventriloquist coming. So you know what? I like to have everybody in the entertainment business on my show. And one thing that's interesting and different about my show, son, I don't know if you know this or not. You've been involved in this for a while, haven't you?
3 years, yeah. Why?
Yeah. I just want to make sure. I didn't know if you were paying attention or even understood that I have on eclectic guests. You are familiar with eclectic guests, right?
Yeah. I mean, didn't we have that one deleted episode with the mime?
We did.
Yeah, that was a great interview, I think.
Well, it was a great interview, and then also we had our deaf appreciation show where we turned both mics off while I did the interview so no one could hear it. And if you can't read lips, it was no good for you. But to me, it was an honor of those who've never been able to hear people speak and saying, now you guys know what it feels like. How do you like it? So it was kind of our dig at the hearing and saying, you guys have no respect for those who've never had this privilege.
The only thing I would have changed, we should have scheduled the signer to be interviewed the same day. Missed opportunity.
You're right. Well, you know what? Sometimes I rely on you to come up with these special gimmicks and gadgets and gizmos and just new ways of engaging our audience so that they come back to watch us. What do you think is the thing that's most interesting to people watching our show? Why? What do you think brings these people back time after time after time again?
Probably the guests would be my guess.
Okay, but it's not me? But what does that mean they do perhaps with my hosting abilities, my insights, my wisdom, my inspiration?
You definitely host.
Yeah, but don't you think sometimes people show up because they think I'm kind of clever and humorous? Yeah, I'm sure someone has to have at some point. Well, listen, I want you to know this. It is a Monday night, and it's a drizzly day. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today, son, before we move on to Sean Paul Murphy, who, by the way, you are familiar with these guests because you do all the editing, so you have to sit and listen and really dissect what these people are up to. Did you find that an interesting interview?
Oh, yeah, it was really interesting.
Good to hear that. Did you notice that he went off on a tangent about a comedic crew? I didn't see this coming. A big fan of
Three Stooges.
Yeah. How about you? You a Stooge fan?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yes.
Who's your favorite? Larry Fine?
Come on. I would say Larry. He's the quote-unquote voice of reason.
He is a voice of reason.
You never thought you'd see that in the Three Stooges, but apparently. You know?
He's like the straight man.
Yeah, it's the straight man, funny man routine, but with
Yeah.
two funny man, and
Yeah.
none of them are sane.
And who would all have to agree, who are Stoogephiles, was the greatest of all the Stooges?
I would say Larry.
No.
Mo?
No.
Curly.
Of course.
Curly?
Curly!
I
That all that crazy.
mean, he had his mannerisms. I'll give him that. But I mean, in
He
terms
just
of
was
comedic
unique.
artistry,
He was the best. He really was. And well, we'll find this out in the interview, but I've never was a huge Stooge fan, believe it or not. I watched him as a kid, believe it or not. I did enjoy that. But, you know, I got to say, to then duplicate what you've just seen with your friends and say, hey, this would be funny if I took this hammer and clubbed you over the head with it and then poked my fingers into your eyeballs. I got to tell you something. It didn't translate as well in real time.
I just gotta say though, Larry's gotta have some massive charisma to convince his friends, hey, why don't we make money harming ourselves bodily for the amusement of others? And they were just like, yes, comedy gold.
Well, and think about all the times he had hunks of his hair ripped out of his head.
Yeah, this was
Because he had that puffy hair and then bald. Yeah.
Yeah, this was, back when makeup and hair and makeup specialists probably weren't where they were right now. How much of that do you think was actually real?
Oh, it was all real. Yeah, they really poked each other in the eyes. They really ripped each other's hair out by the roots. They really hit each other head with hammers and wrenches and anvils and kicked them in the butt. Yeah, they really did that, Wyatt. And the earth is so flat, you wouldn't believe it.
I mean, the commitment, though, the commitment to the bit, you just don't see that nowadays in comedy because everything can be CGI'd or.
That's right.
Yeah, but back then, especially those those silent movie people who had to do all their own stunts.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to do me.
Sorry, it's just I wasn't done yet.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be hysterical. Go.
It's not even scared. I was going to be informative. I was just saying, the artistry of Hollywood was really on display then. Nowadays, Hollywood's just a money printer.
Oh, for sure.
It's not meant to be an art form. It's meant to be modern art, not like Rococo or actual art.
La banana le duct tape wallow.
or
hey, I'm going to make an executive call here. Can you turn the fan down that is so loud in?
Oh, I'm sorry. You mean the fan that you turned on? Mm-hmm. Ah, yes, that one. Yeah.
Just the fan down a bit.
Don't worry, audience. I'll be right back from fixing our beautiful host's horrible sense of judgment. I'll be right back. I'm sure he'll entertain you with something in the meantime. Don't worry. They're only watching you, so whatever you say will be remembered for eternity.
Okay. Folks, if you ever want to start your own podcast, do yourself a favor. Make sure that the fan that warms or cools the studio area isn't blasting.
All right, I'm back. Don't worry.
So that's why I said nobody is more articulate and just locked in, laser focus on audio as my son Wyatt. Nothing, and I mean nothing, skips past him. If there's some ambient noise happening that certainly is not what we want in the final product, he'll be right on top of that. Matter of fact, I usually have to slow him down. Wait, don't leave now. Don't go fix that now. But he's always ahead of me. I never see it coming, but that's how he is. He's that good.
Are you saying the audience wouldn't want to know that we are properly air-conditioned?
Well, no, they do. They care about our well-being, I believe, and that's why they show up regularly. But I do want to make a comment, if I could, about something that I've noticed about humans in general. Now, I'm not talking about generals who are humans, because that's a military process, and who am I to engage in the military? I have nothing but great respect for the military, especially the generals, because they can have me shipped to the front lines. Well, they can't me because I'm not actually in the military, but let's just say they could. They'd be the guys that could most frontline me. So they're not the ones that I want to tick off, if you know what I'm talking about. But I did want to talk to you about human, I guess, behavior. It's something that's bothered me for a while. And if you're new to Brad Stein Has Issues, we have wonderful guests on, that's true. But we talk about things too. If you heard the opening dialogue, we're comedy, because I'm a professional comic, conservatism. It's a conservative philosophy about conserving ancient wisdom, conserving history, conserving the Constitution as it really intended, conserving states' rights, conserving limited government, conserving less taxes, conserving more agency, more freedom, and more autonomy. So it's conserving wonderful things and also trying to be very aware of mistakes that are made so they can be rectified and move to the future. Remember, we're all sinners, and the world's filled with people who are in control of things and do it poorly. So if you want to conserve morality and ethics and goodness, you have to be vigilant. So it's comedy, conservative, and Christianity. That's Christianity, simply Jesus Christ, the only human being that's ever existed on earth, that is historically documented, that was crucified and then rose from the dead to prove that he had power over death, which means he's God. And if you don't know that, you need to. He is the one who literally gave you, if you're an atheist, the actual data and proof that God exists, and he dimensionalized himself and died for you. If you don't believe in Jesus, you go to hell. If you do believe in Jesus, you're spared that, and you spend eternity with God, the Creator, who wants you desperately to jump on his family. So that's what it means. Comedy, conservatism, Christianity collide in a cacophony, lots of loud clashing cymbals of clarity. We try to get somewhere. And so I do try to give you guys things to think about, things that can inspire you, maybe, things that can make you, I think, maybe rethink how you see the world and try to do things differently, right? And hopefully better. I know I'm always on a journey. I've got a lot to learn. That's what the Daily Brads are. If you watch my Daily Brads, go to Brad Stein Has Issues YouTube channel, subscribe, hit the notification buzzer. Please also listen on Spotify and iTunes on Life Audio Network. So again, do this and get on Instagram and just see what I got out there, because I'm putting a lot of stuff out. And I need your help by listening and also reviewing it. This is great. Give it a thumbs up. Give it 5 stars, whatever. Lie is what I'm getting at, so that we have a chance to trick the algorithms and to put me in first place where I don't belong. But, I'm hedging my bets by letting you guys kind of push me to the front of the line. Why? Because I'm just a regular guy trying to make a go of things. And you care. You have remember, you have sympathy for me. I'm marginalized. If you're progressive watching this, I'm marginalized. My podcast is not number top 10 or 100. So I'm marginalized. So I need you guys to kick me to the front of the line. Throw a little DEI my way. I could use it. But I do want you to know that one of the things I've seen, behaviors that I've seen, has to do with how people self-importance themselves, how they see themselves as more important and more basically pride-filled, arrogant, narcissistic, we could say as well, in that they believe their perspective isn't just true, but is the only truth, and to not see it your way, they think is simply to be ignorant, foolish, not intelligent, not deep, not having sophisticated acumen, that their perspective is in fact the truth. I'll give you an example of that. Matter of fact, I got a little clip of a comedy clip I did that's out on YouTube. You can go see the whole thing, but this is just a small piece of it, and there's a reason why I'm showing you this. I think it's a couple minutes long. It was shot in Ball State University in 2005. It was my third album called Tolerate This. It's just a quick clip. Have a little laugh, and then we'll come back and I'll get back to what I was trying to get at. Wyatt, if you would, find the right button for once and push it. Nothing is as it seems. I can't even go to the movie theaters anymore and order a beverage. You know why? Because we don't have common courtesy. It used to be this. If you went into the movie theater, ordered a beverage, and they didn't have it, they courteously said, "I'm sorry, we don't have that. Would you care for this?" Now, they just name the nearest beverage equivalent like it's the same thing, and we can't tell the difference. It's like a Twilight Zone episode where suddenly nobody can communicate in your language anymore. Oh, you've all been here before. Can I help you? Yeah, give me a Coke. Pepsi. I'd Coke. I'd like a Pepsi, okay? Coke. Give me a 7-Up. Sprite. Dr. Pepper. Mr. Pibb. That's what I want. I want a world where no matter what somebody says to you, you can just interpret it to mean whatever you want it to mean. I use it on them. That'll be $5. 35 cents? Thank you. They don't even pay attention anymore. There's no courtesy at the retail establishment where they actually look at your face and care you're there. I had a guy show me a ticket, tear my ticket, send me my way. 2 minutes later, I come out to go to the restroom. I come back and he's like, can I see your stub? Can I see your stub? You gotta nail this guy. What? Fine. That is rude, man. My wife's deaf in a wheelchair. You want me to bring her out here and spin around, you freak? Make you happy? Then my wife sends me back for popcorn and Coke during the movie. So when I come back in, everybody's eyes are adjusted to the dark except mine. Every guy knows this idea where you got all this stuff and you're like, where was I? I can't, where? Kids are afraid. Mommy, what's wrong with him? Honey, he's retarded. Leave him alone. But I don't. Girls always send you back for your popcorn and Coke. Because they're different. So that's just a little clip of something I did 20 years ago. 20 years ago. Now, why am I bringing it up? Am I there to brag about my little comedy escapade that I can get in front of a crowd and make a few people chuckle every now and again? Is that why I brought it up? To pat myself on the back and said, look what I can do, ladies and gentlemen. I can be a stand-up comic. No, I showed it to you because I wanted you to see the routine. The routine had to do with this idea of asking for something, and then they tried to just give you an equivalent without kind of saying, oh, we don't have that, or I'm sorry, we only have this. So that was the joke. I was looking for a joke, and I found it. So I did that, and again, it's 2005, so 20 years ago, okay? So I was looking at my Instagram. Why, have you ever heard of Instagram? No? Okay. I guess I don't have a sidekick.
I have heard of Instagram. I was trying to think of something funny, and then I realized social media itself is one big joke.
Okay. Well, anyways, on Instagram, I saw this guy who, I don't know if he's a comic, he might be, but he has a podcast, and he sent me a note, Wyatt. It's like, hey, would you ever want to come on my show virtually? Which I guess he means like Zoom, like we do?
Yeah, like we do.
Okay. So he said, you ever want to come on my show virtually? And I said, well, what would we discuss? And I never heard anything about him. But anyways, he then put out that clip about the Coke Pepsi routine, 7-Up, Sprite, all that. Okay. It was a smaller version on Instagram, just kind of that's it. And he said, hey, and I forgot the guy's name. I don't know this comic. It's like... Hinkbein? I don't know. Steve. Anyways, it was some guy I don't know, and he said, "Hey, he did your bit, or he's doing your bit." Now, from what I understand, so I went to find this guy. I'd never heard of him, and I found the thing, and I was listening to it, and it wasn't my cup of tea, but I was trying to hear him do that bit. It's like, well, what do you mean? I just was curious his version. And it was way towards the end of the set when I finally got to it. And it was not nearly as written out as mine. It didn't have all the nuances to it. It was really just basically Coke and Pepsi and Sierra Mist. I liked it better when you called it 7-Up. That was it, when you called it 7-Up. So it wasn't anything. But here's the deal. He said he's doing your bit. Okay, now, from what I could see from when I watched this guy's set, it said this was from 2 years ago when this came out. I don't know if that's when the whole thing came out but it was fairly recently. It seems like he made a reference to Trump, so it might have been 18, 19, 20. So even then, we're looking at it 5, 6 years ago, maybe. I don't know, but not much more than that, okay? And he did this bit. Again, it wasn't as written out as mine, didn't have all the other pieces to the puzzle, but it was similar. And he says he's doing your bit. Now I'm saying, well, wait a minute. If he recorded this thing, let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. It was in 2018. Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. I recorded mine in 2005. So even at the best case scenario, it was 13 years ago from the time he did his. So no, I didn't take his bit. Now, I'm not saying he was accusing me of stealing it. Maybe he was just saying, hey, this guy's doing something that I've seen you do. But there's two things I want you to understand about comedy that you guys should know. And it's really about the arts in general. But I think comedy is more specific. And it's called parallel development. Now, Wyatt, have you ever heard of parallel development?
Oh, yeah, you talk about it all the time.
I do?
Yeah.
Oh.
All the time. I'm surprised we don't have our own segment on the podcast about it.
What would we call it?
Parallels of parallel... Evidence? I don't know. I want to keep the alliteration. It's fun.
I understand. Well, anyways, I doubt that's going to happen, but thank you for bringing it up, and at our next board meeting, we'll get some votes.
How did you know I'm bored at the meetings?
Well, I could tell because you brought a cot. But I want you to understand that parallel development simply means that if you're a comedian, you think funny. That's what you do. It's your livelihood. You try to find funny things and think of funny things and do funny things in a funny way based on life and what you see. Am I right? Okay. Which means if there's, I don't know, if there's 10,000 comics in the United States that are somewhat doing it professionally, maybe that's too many. Maybe there aren't that many. But I'm just, again, throwing it out there. Maybe if you put on all the open micers, all the YouTubers, let's say 10,000, and you're looking for something funny all the time, you're going to come up with similar material. That's why there's lots of material about McDonald's and flying in planes and motels, because that's what we experience, so we find the funny in it, as well as relationships, which is what some people have made the fun of from the get-go. It's one of the oldest routines there is. Men and women are different. So you're not going to ever come up with something nobody else has had some derivative of. And so for him to say that, he got your bit, is simply to say, yeah, I thought of it, he thought of it, I thought of it before, but maybe somebody thought of it before me. I don't know. I thought of it, I thought it was funny, it worked, and I used it. Seinfeld said that if you come up with a routine and you know you didn't see somebody else do it, so you took it from them, and you just wrote it on your own and did it, it's yours. It's yours too, because it's impossible, like I said, to come up with something that somebody else hasn't somewhere down the road. And I remember when I would work in comedy clubs, I would say to myself, to the feature, I was usually the headliner, so the feature and the opener, they might do a routine using a topic that I'm going to use in my routine. Now, I'm the headliner. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but there is a decorum when it comes to comedy club interaction with the fellow comics. Now, comedy has changed a lot since I was doing it in the clubs. At that time, in the clubs, they just brought you in if you were funny. If they liked you and the audience liked you, they'd bring you back. And then you'd build a little following in this little community. And when they came back, oh, I like him, he's a favorite here at the club. But you didn't sell tickets. You would eventually. People would come to see you and they would buy tickets because you were there. But for the most part, people went to the club to see comedy and they just sort of rolled the dice and hope you'd be good. So now you basically have to bring a crowd. You come, they sell tickets, that's where you make your money, or you don't. And if you don't sell tickets, they don't bring you back. So it'd be trickier. But in those days, when I was doing it, I'd be there, the feature act would be there in the opener. Now, part of the decorum is you can go up to the guy and you can say, hey, I notice you're doing a routine about airplanes. Listen, I have this big airplane bit. It's an integral part of my show, so I'm going to need you to drop that so I can have this for me. I get all the laughs for me. You can kind of do that. I never did. I never went to a guy and said, I don't want you to curse, even though I was clean. And cursing does change the room dynamic. They say, this is the kind of language we're going to use. This is the kind of topics we're going to get at. So it creates a cruder environment, a all no holds bar environment. And I was completely clean. I'm a Christian. I'm conservative. So I'm not going to give them that. I have to shift gears and change this entire audience into something else so they'll listen to my comedy. So I saw that as a challenge. And so I never told people to drop a bet or don't curse, because I thought, if I can't follow you, I don't deserve to be a headliner. That's the point. I'm supposed to be able to do the best show I can under the circumstances with whatever crowd is here. If it's a Tuesday night and there's only 30 people, I have to kill the best that I can, like I would on Saturday night when it's full and everybody's there to laugh and it's easy. So the headliner is not hired for what he's going to do on Saturday night. He's hired for what he's going to do on Wednesday night when there's not a big crowd and they're not energetic, and you have to milk whatever's there. So they go home and say, you should go see this guy. He's very funny, for the rest of the week. That's what you're being paid to be able to handle and to do it consistently. Well, the only way I could do that was to not make it easier by telling somebody, drop this, censor this, don't say that, keep the... Do you know that even the hardcore cursing guys would go up to the guys in front and say, I don't want you cursing. They wanted to save the F word for themselves. That's really how it worked. They wanted all the laughs that you're going to garner from the word itself. So I just felt like I'm not going to do that. Okay, so why am I setting all of this up? And since we're talking now about comedy on this particular podcast episode. Well, I guess it's because, like I said, as a Christ follower, and it's the single most important thing in my life, because if it's true, there's no more important story. I try to look at the world and see how it conforms to the way God would want things to be and how we actually do. But also, just culturally, how do we behave? How are we civil? Are we not civil? Are we kind? Are we not kind? Are we able to get along with people that disagree with us? Which is the most important part of a free society. That people you disagree with, you allow them an audience. Don't get angry. Don't get mad. Don't attack them. Let them have a point of view. If you can do that, you are mature. It also means you are very secure in your belief system because you're not intimidated by the dissent, and you're able to articulate your point of view and even disagree. If your belief system cannot withstand intellectual scrutiny, abandon it or adapt it or change it or revise it till it works, or you shouldn't be believing that way. So one thing I have seen on the internet numerous times when it comes to comedy clips of mine or anybody's is people have a tendency to get lazy with the vernacular. And they'll say this guy sucks. This guy's not even funny. Neither of those two phrases are true. Neither one. Why? If I'm watching a guy, he's telling a joke and everybody's laughing, and then somebody says he's not funny, you have to stop if you're articulate and observant. Well, wait a minute. Everybody's laughing. How can he not be funny? That's what funny means. He said something, they found it humorous, and they laughed about it. So he's clearly funny. This guy sucks. He doesn't suck. If he sucked, he'd say these things and people would stare at him or boo him or, go after him or heckle him, and they're not. So he doesn't suck. So you need to get in the habit of saying, I think this guy sucks. That's different. That's your subjective opinion, and the performance art is observed by subjectivity. Not everybody's going to like Van Gogh. Not everybody's going to like Picasso. Not everybody's going to like opera. Not everybody's going to like country and Western. Doesn't mean it sucks. It means some people like it and some don't. Subjectivity. Another thing you can't say is, he's not even funny if people are laughing. What you can say is, if you're being true to reality and communicating properly, I don't think this guy's funny. Fine. Welcome to free speech. Welcome to an opinion. Welcome to your own point of view and your own agency given to you. And you can even articulate it. I don't think this guy's funny. Good for you. Say that. That's what free speech is. And if you say that on my channel, I'm going to leave you on there. I don't care. I'm the one that made a living as a comic. I'm the one that bought a house doing comedy. I know I'm funny, so I don't care what you think. So I leave it up there to show people what free speech looks like. But the idea that we are so self-important that we make declarative statements. This guy isn't funny when people are laughing is an insult to all the people that like him. But more importantly, it's extremely narcissistic and arrogant and self-righteous, because what you're saying is, I am declaring something that none of these people see, but they're wrong. I'm right because I don't like it. Thus, it's what is true. This is exactly what happens when people who get angry at someone who voted for Donald Trump. Well, you're all cult. You're in a cult. You're all bigots. You're all Nazis. None of these things have been proven. They're just declared upon somebody. Makes it a lot easy to make a declarative statement towards somebody's different perspective and not have to prove it if nobody cares if you prove it. If everybody joins in as a mob and says, I agree with you, let's all dogpile on this guy because we don't like his point of view. Let's just declare him a Nazi, and that's all we have to do. And people start believing it. There's nothing more dangerous. There's nothing more. A mob mentality is as bad as it gets because you can't stop the people from suddenly getting their torches and their pitchforks and killing the monster that they've deemed is evil. So it's important that you, especially as a Christ follower, because you're supposed to be the example to everybody else, say things like, I don't find this funny, or, yeah, this doesn't work for me. That's fine. That's a different conversation. Maybe the people that do like the guy might come in behind you and go, well, here's why I like him, or did you see it like this? Or maybe it takes some time to get used to him. That is the way to have a civil conversation, a civil dialogue, a civil interaction. Everybody gets their point of view. Everybody's dignified, and nobody has to feel that they don't have a place at the table of ideas. So I just wanted you guys to see another way to think about how you engage the culture, because as a Christian, your job is to redeem the culture, to fix the culture. That's why I bring my son Wyatt in, because he's a cultural advocate. He sits there scouring the news to find out what's going on out there, because he's a political analyst. He is a philosophical genius. Wyatt, anything out there that you've come across that has really disturbed you and you felt like nobody, but nobody would have a way to articulate and fix this single-handedly than my dad?
Yeah, I actually do have a news story.
I was kidding. Don't say something. We're live, and now I'm going to look like an idiot if I don't know what to say. Wyatt, it was rhetorical. You're supposed to say, Dad, you've always fixed everything before we got to the camera, so I had nothing to bring up.
The fan?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, there was one news story that I read about this morning.
Oh, really?
I don't know what to say for it.
Waiting.
They are going to reopen Alcatraz Island as a prison. And I can't tell you how excited I am.
Why? What is it about Alcatraz that just compels you to want to know more?
One of America's folk tales almost. It's a legendary.
It is.
It's like the Great Wall of China for convicted felons.
Yes, it is. Why, did you know that they have tours to Alcatraz Island?
I know, and people thought it was hard to get out of that place. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, they're ferrying people in and out all day long. Apparently, all you needed was a ferry, and you could have escaped Alcatraz, which they said was the unescapable prison. And they did never find somebody that escaped. There was these three guys that kind of vanished.
Yeah, they made I think it was like a rubber dinghy out of a raincoat or something, and they sailed off, and nobody knows if they made it or not.
And I think they found the dinghy somewhere washed ashore, but they never found the guys. So either they died, and that was part of why they thought this was unescapable, because it was like, I don't know, a mile or 2 miles, and it's freezing water. It's the Pacific Ocean up by the Bay Area. And so they don't know if these guys ever survived or not. But it was closed very soon after those guys. It was 62 or 3 that they closed down Alcatraz. It was old. It was falling apart. But here's what I'm curious about. And I think, did they say why they want to reopen Alcatraz?
Yeah, they did. To house the illegal migrants that they were deporting.
There you have it. Well, if anybody knows how to swim over a torrential river, it'd be them. So maybe that's the wrong people to do. They've already done it once. Maybe they'll be ready to jump in again. You know, I got to tell you this. I'm curious, though, are they going to keep the tours and the bus tours and the ferry tours going as it's filled with criminals. Because wouldn't that make for an even more interesting and compelling Alcatraz? Is not only do we get to visit this fabled, legendary place, but to actually have the new convicts in there. Maybe they could have them do little dances or little puppet shows, or maybe they could ask them to do interpretive dance, right? Or sing little songs, or put together little picnics that give them some dignity again. You know what? Let me show you guys on a tour. I'm not talking about the evil guys that are the worst of the worst that are in the hole. I'm talking about the new guy that he's just a blue collar criminal that stole billions of dollars of cryptocurrency, and so he's a nice guy. And they could give him a special tour to show you here's the bars that you try to escape from and you can't. And I hope they don't lose the revenue and the fun that could come from having convicts give tours to Japanese tourists.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm sorry. I just can't stop thinking about all the new tours you could have. Because think about it.
I am.
The moment you start having tours of a active prison island, well, that's just a museum. That's not a museum anymore. That's an interactive experience.
It is. Well, that's what I'm saying. And maybe and what if every time they brought the tour in, one person was selected that gets left behind and actually becomes stuck in the prison, and it's what happened? It could be like a punk show. You've been punked, right? You've been and they leave them in for months, and they pay their bills. They don't know this, but they're paying their bills, and they're taking care of the family and the children. They're taking them on picnic. They have some representative, some father, figure to take over while the guy's stuck in there. But think about the fun of that, and have hidden cameras of him going, "Hey, please, somebody, is anybody gonna let me out?" And he thinks he's there forever, and then eventually they let him out and said, it was all in good fun. Weeks later, when he's emaciated.
Yeah, you'd think that. Honestly, I would love to see a reality show. Who can survive Alcatraz the longest?
Okay.
Think about it, man. You can't do that now that it's... I actually know. You could do it now that they're reopening it. But it's been closed for how long? 40 years or so? 50? 60? A while?
Since 60s, so yeah, 60.
Why on earth did nobody think to do a reality show on that?
Maybe they did. I mean, have you done a lot of Alcatraz research, son, over the years?
No, not really.
No.
I just read about it.
You just stumbled on it today and you thought, hey, I'm going to slow that out and see what my dad can do to try to juggle this.
Yeah, it was the only newsworthy thing I could find that I thought you'd have anything to say about.
Well, listen, we are coming up with this idea of using the tourism, not losing that income. The Bay Area needs it desperately to clean up the feces that they allow the homeless to do on the sidewalks. So they need some extra dough. Let them come in, do that. Like I said, we could turn it into a reality show where one guy gets left behind into the cell and we can just hysterical. Watch him weep and cry and go into the fetal position. I mean, I know it would be drastic, White, but we'll pay him some compensation afterwards. You've got to think about the big picture, White, and quit shutting things down just because we're getting started. No great invention ever took place without risks and failures. And the quicker you understand that, White, the quicker you'll understand why our podcast is barely holding on.
Yeah. If only we would have thought of this sooner.
Why, we are the Alcatraz of podcasts.
We are the Alcatraz of podcasts because we're unapproachable.
Yeah.
Nope. Everybody's in here is stuck for life.
There's no escape.
There's no escape. If you try to escape, we'll find your dinghy, wash the shore.
Yes.
Yeah. And we're open for tours.
Oh my goodness. Why? Yes, we are. That could be some income source.
Yeah.
Have people come in for tours. Why didn't we think of that? We had Ashley Haas once. We had St. Nick Kress here once. Who else did we have that was part of our fan base? Didn't somebody else show?
Maybe,
Was it just the two of them?
I think it was just the two of them.
What about Karen Boyd? Did she come?
I don't think she came.
No. Let's see. Did Stan Simpson come? The Bushwhacker come? No. Let's see. Paula Faye Marie Rouchy. She's my favorite four-named lady. Did she show?
No.
No. What about Forrest Bainey?
Nope.
But what a great name.
It
Forrest
is a
is
great
here.
name.
The force is here.
Force is with us, yes.
See? Oh, Wyatt. If I have to think of everything, especially on the fly during the actual filming, I don't know. I don't know if I can keep it up, son. I feel like there's too much pressure. You know what? I need a good raincoat that I can turn into a boat and just sail off into oblivion and let you handle it from there. Remember, we can just have a blank slate and have this a podcast for the blind only. What difference does it make? They wouldn't know I'm not here.
I mean, if it's the blind we're talking about, we do have an audio-only version of this.
Amen, son. See,
Yep,
now
I'm saying.
you're thinking on your feet. Speaking of thinking on your feet, I don't know if you've ever done a screenplay. Have you ever written a screenplay, Wyatt, that got published, that got made, a movie, a feature film, a episodic television, anything?
I've written stories, but never published them.
Why not?
Because they're not finished yet. And
Maybe
they haven't been for the past 12 years I've been working on them.
Your stories suck.
You don't know that they suck. I've never told you about them.
Wyatt, it was a callback to what I said earlier in my rant. You're supposed to say no. You have to say, I think your stories suck because it's subjective. Wyatt, it was such a setting,
really,
teeing you
though?
up.
Was
Yeah.
it though?
I
Was
was
it
teeing you
really?
up. It was.
Was it really?
It was, and you missed it.
Oh,
It
you
was swing and a
sure?
miss. Whiff.
Look, you don't swing at a ball. You only swing at strikes.
I would
okay?
hope so. And I threw it right
And that,
down the middle.
that wasn't a strike. That ball was rolling on the ground towards the catcher.
Well, either way, son, you swung and you missed.
No,
And
I didn't
tried.
swing. If I swung, I would have told you up on that awful.
Well, listen.
But I don't swing at balls.
Well, I'll tell you what you do swing at, and that is at trying to provide the most provocative, interesting, intriguing guests on Breadsign Issues we can find. And they're not always Christians. Sometimes they're atheists. Sometimes they're progressives. Sometimes they're deconstructors. I'm trying to find, and this is really where I want to take the podcast to another level, is really get a lot more people on who aren't believers. That's the last thing you see on Christian podcasts, is people that don't think like us. Find something in common, but also see if we can understand how they live their lives differently than us. I think it could make for some real great podcastiism. And that's what I'm shooting for, is the best podcastiism that one can put together. Folks, the man that I'm about to introduce to you and you're going to watch has written many plays. If you are familiar with IMDb, the database, the International Movie Database, is that what it is? You can see all of his credits. Some of the movies he wrote, like Sarah's Choice, I was in. Another movie he helped write was called Run On with myself and two other comics and actors. And it might have been one more he wrote that I was in. I don't remember. We'll talk about it there. But again, for so many people that watch this, and again, a lot of show up because of me, they think, oh, he's a comic, or maybe you like my acting and you're interested in seeing what I have to say in a podcast. This will be interesting to you guys. A lot of people that maybe want to write stage plays or just write stories in general. This is a guy that's made a living doing it in the television and the film market. So he's got a lot of perspective. And we ended up in the beginning talking about the Three Stooges. I didn't know that he did an entire, I think in college maybe, a dissertation on the Three Stooges. So I didn't see this coming. So we started talking about that. So it's very interesting. If you would please go to Breadsign Has Issues, subscribe. Please like, subscribe, folks. Share this with all of your friends. Put it out on Instagram. We're trying to grow, and we're getting somewhere little by little. So I hope you guys will also go to bradstein.com, sign up for the Mighty 10,000 and the Militia of the Mind so you can get access to my comedy. I do have a new one coming out soon. We're not sure when, so when it does, that will be a big announcement. Come see me live. I will be next week at a pregnancy resource fundraiser in Ohio. So go to bradstein.com to see where I'm going to be. I'll also be in Indiana with Rick Green at the end of this month. I think it's the 28th of May, as well as Sacramento, California. I will be I just blanked, 23rd, I think. Go to my website, and I'll be in Sacramento performing comedy with Carrie Pomerelli. So this is what I do. This is what I'm trying to do, and I need you to help me do it. So, folks, thanks for showing up. Thanks for being here for the first part of the show. And now, please, oh please, oh please, enjoy this interesting, intriguing conversation with a friend and a very talented screenwriter, author, and Christian, Sean Paul Murphy. Enjoy. Well, as you know, on Brad Sign Has Issues, we love to bring on performance artists and people in the business because so many people come on Brad Sign Has Issues because I'm a comic or because maybe they saw me do a show or they saw me as an actor. Who knows what they've seen me or maybe they've never seen me at all and are just forced to watch this because it's like a one layer of hell in Dante's Inferno. I don't know why you're watching me. What I do know is the people that I bring on always are very enlightening, inspiring. And this particular gentleman that we're talking to today is an element of the acting arts that we haven't discussed yet. We've had actors on, we've had producers, we've had directors. But this time we get a screenwriter, and this is where all the magic happens because if you don't have a story, you don't got nothing. This particular guy is somebody who is an old friend and very accomplished in the world of screenwriting because he does more than that. Editor, he has produced things, I'm sure, and probably lots of other things. We'll figure it out. So instead of me wasting time, let's get right to it. Please welcome an old friend and screenwriting legend in the faith-based industry, Sean Paul Murphy.
Hey, good to see you, Brad.
Hey, good to be seen. How are you, buddy?
Well, I feel old and
Okay.
as if I were Adam,
Uh,
laboring under the piled centuries since paradise.
yes, but you know what? Did he
That's actually a quote from Moby Dick. I told myself the next interview I was going to do, I was going to throw some Herman Melville in. Actually, I'm
Oh,
doing great.
well, listen, if you represent one of the seven people that have actually read the entire Moby Dick, then we're going to be grateful that you have enlightened us and given us a moment of sophistication before it goes downhill. Well, listen, Sean, good to have you on, as I said. You heard a little bit of the intro. One thing I've noticed is that when I perform live events, comedy events, um, people ask you for an intro, right? And they'll say, can you give me an intro? And I don't know what to write because in some ways it's kind of like I don't care. Number two, it feels weird to write about yourself. Here's what I've done. So I say, you just go to my website and there's a bio, just pick out a couple things you think make sense. The problem is they oftentimes read the whole bio and you're like sitting there going, no, 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 no. I didn't mean like 2 pages of stuff. So what I've always done with my intros is just try to make them kind of concise and kind of cut to the chase with the people and let their interview speak for itself. But you are more than a screenwriter, even though that's the thing I really wanted to talk about today because it is different and not everybody. Maybe there's been a lot of folks that have written screenplays, maybe, but not everybody gets them produced. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
And you have done that. And so I'm going to introduce you not only as a screenwriter, but something even more interesting is two of the films that you wrote, I actually was in as an actor, at least two that I know of, unless I'm forgetting one.
Three.
One was called Sarah's Choice,
Yes.
which was the first film I was in, which was a pro-life adventure that also had Rebecca St. James, who's been on the podcast, and Marriage Retreat, where I just did a cameo, so I was kind of in and out anyways. But that's kind of how we got
You
started.
forgot the other one.
The only other one that it just popped into my head, if you're talking about Run On,
Yeah, run on.
okay, but Run On was kind of you had a you wrote a piece of that
I
puzzle,
wrote one third of it with
one
my.
third of it, yeah, because it was more of a biopic of three performers telling their story. So, but that's true. You were involved with that as well. But let's start kind of with. Well, we're going to jump into all this because people that watch me all around the world, but at least in the U.S., a lot of them do watch because they're in the arts and so they like it because I'm a stand-up comic, and some people maybe have seen me in the acting and they appreciate that. And so I just had an opera guy on, a while ago. So I get all aspects of the performing arts. But let me let you kind of describe yourself a little bit. Maybe tell a bit about your background, your life, as quickly or as long as you want to take, and then eventually landing as to how you ended up in screenwriting and so forth.
Okay, well, let me go to my webpage and get my bio.
No, let's not.
Okay, never mind. Sorry, sorry. Well, I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. I was raised in Northeast Baltimore. I still live here. I've traveled the world and worked all over the world, but I've still been here. I went to parochial school, Catholic schools, St. Dominic Elementary School, which was also a middle school, and Archbishop Curley High School, which had nothing to do with the Three Stooges. There was actually an archbishop named
Would have
Curley.
made it a lot more fun school, though.
Yeah, and I just felt bad for all those kids that went to Archbishop Shemp School.
Yeah, right.
They were the sad ones. And
Well,
then I,
and Shemp was the worst of the Stooges anyway. So I mean, how can anybody compete with Curly?
that's
Seriously.
right, no one can, but I'd go with Joe Besser, maybe the worst.
Oh, yeah, that was a disaster, but they were running out of options.
You know what? I am actually a Stooge authority. I'm being quoted in an upcoming biography of Shemp.
Really interesting.
Yeah, because in college, I wrote this paper. I was told I would fail. It was my big um, film and culture paper, term paper, and I decided to do communication within the Three Stooges, and used these communication models to decide how the Stooges communicated in their films and the structure of their comedy. And
Really?
I posted it because you got a blog, you're always posting something, and a lot of people have read that. And what it really showed was how essential Larry Fine was to the comedy. Because
Wow.
like Larry doesn't, if Larry wasn't there, Mo and Curly would not work together.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
listen, we're bypassing your bio to jump into the Stooges, which
okay, yeah. Let me get back to the
no,
bio. So
well, but you know what? I'll tell you what, though. I would rather stay here because people will find out about you as we talk. But this is interesting because I certainly didn't see this coming. But I think it could add some textures to this interview because honestly, I'm a stand-up comic.
yeah,
And one of the things that I heard over the years was that men are more Stooge fans than women for the most part. And I remember even hearing or reading, or maybe in an interview, Seinfeld was a big fan of the Stooges. And a lot of comics were, I'm going to be very honest with you, and hopefully it'll make a more provocative interview. I was never a big Stooge fan. I felt that it was too just I don't know if this is too simplistic, but it was silly to me. I enjoyed the Marx Brothers. I loved
yeah,
nuance. I loved depth. I loved because the Marx Brothers to me were a precursor to Monty Python, the Flying Circus, in that they were silly but sophisticated. If you really were listening, it's like, holy smoke, these guys know how to write comedy because it's not simplistic. And the Stooges obviously were slapstick, literally. That
yeah,
if they didn't have that, they had nowhere to go. So I'm very interested in because you're a screenwriter, you
yeah.
obviously are a smart man, and certainly know how to write the different genres because you've written comedy, but you've written drama. So you kind of have to understand the beats in storytelling, especially with comedy. It's the hardest thing to write, I think. So tell me about the Stooges. What is it that you like about them?
Well, when I wrote this paper, it was like 1982. There was no VHS or anything out yet. And I was just a fan of classic comedy, the Marx Brothers. I really liked Laurel and Hardy, the Marx Brothers, the Stooges, and we'd get Super 8 millimeter versions of them, sound things. And two reelers were really easy to buy back in the day. So I had a lot of the films. And if you were going to do a study of a group or something, you had to own the films. I mean, you had to, it isn't like there was no streaming or anything. So I had between me and some other collectors, we probably had like 15 Stooge shorts, and I concentrated on the curly ones. And I always I was more of a Laurel and Hardy and Marx Brothers fan, but the Stooges, I do have some affection for them. I will say one thing: I'm listening to a podcast about Abbott and Costello, and I liked them as kids, but to me as an adult, they don't work. I'm trying to watch some of the movies and listen to them, trying to regain that appreciation I had for them. But the Stooges are very interesting in the sense that who hits who's an authority, because Moe's always an authority. And whenever Moe is not present, there's no authority between Larry and Curly. and
So they're more chaotic.
yeah, they're equal. So they have to listen to Mo. You know what I mean? And so they are. So when Mo is not present, anything can happen between those two. But anything Mo does, stuff backfires on him and everything. But you know, it's just fascinating. It's sort of like Mo will do if it's hard to sum up, without all the charts. But if Larry wasn't there, it would just be stupid. I mean, a lot of people think they are stupid to begin with, but because it would just be these two people hitting on each other, and they don't relate as well to the outside world as, say, like the Marx Brothers. The Marx Brothers, the point of the Marx Brothers is you take the Marx Brothers and you put them somewhere where they don't belong so that they can relate with the outside world. The Three Stooges, most of their comedy is them hitting each other. So they're more insular in their comedy than, like, say, the Marx Brothers, whose job is to, deflate pompous attitudes and things like that. So within their dynamic, if it was just Curly and just Mo, who were the primary ones, it just wouldn't work after a while. And who relate, Mo related more to outside people than the others. So I broke this down completely. It was a long paper; it's hard to sum up, but it is fascinating. And today's kids, because we have some of our grandkids living with us now, they don't understand slapstick. Now, I have gotten to the point, these kids, I have like 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 13-year-old grandkids and all. And the younger ones don't even understand black and white movies. They don't, it's like, one of them calls gray movies. Is this a gray movie? And,
Yeah.
but they don't, they get into Laurel and Hardy, but they do not like the Three Stooges, boys or girls, because they don't understand. They weren't raised in the same kind of environment where we were, where we had like Looney Tunes and like people were always like hitting and blowing everybody up and everything. If you look at what kids watch today, even though it's the same characters we grew up with, it's devoid of, they're not the same characters. It might be Bugs Bunny, but they're not doing what they did in the old days anymore. So the idea, slapstick humor just does not, it just confuses them to why they're even doing these things.
That is really interesting because okay. So one of the things that started occurring maybe in the 80s, I'm going to guess, but could have been before that. But people started looking at video games when video games started coming out, and first person participation games that didn't used to exist, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't like shoot space creatures or whatever. I mean, we didn't have that. I mean, you and I are about the same age. So we watched the first video games come out. The first was Pong, right?
Yeah.
And it
Oh
was
my God, it burns your TV screen if you left it on too much.
exactly. And so, but we watched them move into, these ability to shoot and eventually got a little bit more graphic where it's really army guys really killing people. And we heard a lot of people, even in Congress at that time, would come up with this idea that this is creating violence in kids and this is condoning violence and you are I don't know, I guess you are making it less seem normalized, I suppose, or
Yeah.
whatever, however they want to perceive it. And I remember when those ideas first came out, Sean, I think I was kind of in agreement. Now I'm a young guy at this time, so maybe I'm in my 20s, but I'm thinking, yeah, that's probably true because it was still kind of fresh, right? It was still kind of unique that we were watching this ability for me to shoot a guy vicariously through a thing, and there's a sense of a rush that we now see in scrolling on TV, telephones and so forth. This idea of getting you that adrenaline rush or whatever it's called. But the reason I'm bringing up that sort of more modern version of where violence should not be encouraged. But the Stooges were incredibly violent and physically so. I mean, they're poking each other. And I mean, if they really did the things they did, hit you with a hammer, sawing you, you'd be really hurt. But nobody ever said, okay, we can't have these guys existing because they're going to make kids want to hit each other with hammers and poke each other in the eye. And I'm sure that happened now and again. but it was almost like we knew this isn't real, so it's given us permission to know that we can laugh at it because we don't really do this to people and we
Yeah.
shouldn't really do this to people. So this gives us a funny, almost a breaking of the taboo, the permission to laugh at it because we know we're laughing because we know you really can't do this. It's kind of like when you and I grew up, you could make fun of Polish people and have a Polak joke
Yeah.
because you gave each other permission because we knew you're not really supposed to think less of somebody from another ethnicity. So it was almost like a I don't even know an elixir to allow us to really see the irony of things that are happening that we know shouldn't, and so we're giving us permission to watch it. And I'm kind of repeating myself, but I guess what I'm trying to compare is why didn't anybody see that as dangerous to children? Why didn't anybody see that? So there must be a psychological element which you must have broached if you did a term paper on it. So
Well, the media issue is looking at it is they have if you have small kids or grandkids and you watch what they're watching on TV, it's like Paw Patrol where it's always everyone working together. There's really no stakes. And I mean, literally, it's like if you watch even the younger stuff that you'll see like on Disney and all with like, Mickey Mouse and all, it's like it's so lame. I mean, there is no violence, there is no real conflict. And are kids less violent today? I don't know. I have a middle schooler grandkid, and it seems like that school is rife with fights and this and that. I just think I don't know. I don't think to me, what I always found interesting was the dichotomy. People say, well, we got to stop violence. Why are they against sex in movies, but not against violence? And I think the answer is so obvious is that, in the movie, you watch someone shoot someone, and 99% of the people watching it, say you're 18 years old, and 99% of you see the good guy shoot the bad guy, and you're like, you may cheer, you may be happy, but you're not going to go out and shoot somebody. Meanwhile, if there's a sexy girl and it's a sex scene, you're 18 years old, you know, you want to do that,
but what
and
is the difference?
encouraging. And
What
well,
is the difference?
encouraging
Why,
is
what, but,
it's
but
it's
why is there a difference? In other words, those are both behaviors.
well, one is acceptable within the context of society in certain context,
Okay.
but going and shooting someone on the street is never acceptable except in self-defense. So it's churning up emotions that you can, in a sense, use. So I'm not saying necessarily whether it's right or wrong, but that's why that exists like that.
So you said something interesting, and again, we're going to talk about your screenwriting career and just the whole technique and everything. It's going to be very, very enlightening to folks, and so I'm very grateful you came on last minute. But like I said, Sean, I didn't know anything about this Three Stooges thing, and it just kind of piqued my interest when you brought it up because I've always thought about them and found myself feeling like what was I missing by not being a big Stooges fan? Because so many comics said they were that I admire. I mean, and I'm
Yeah,
talking about if I talk about a Seinfeld, for example, who was one of them. I mean, come on, talk about a sophisticated writer, right?
yeah,
He's very meticulous in his writing. He's very, very detailed. I've learned so much from different stand-up comics in my life. You always learn from those who've gone before. And I get different things from different people. The thing I got from Seinfeld was he milked so much out of one idea. He would
yeah.
take one concept, get the laugh started, and then he just found every little detail that could be discussed about this idea, milked it, found things I had never seen. That's the beauty of comedy. So my point is, watching his stand-up career or even his sitcom career, which was also fairly sophisticated, you would think Probably not a Stooges fan. Maybe Marx Brothers, maybe Laurel and Hardy. That's another one that's brought up a lot. But I guess can you? Okay, so let's start. Let's go to two different ideas that I want you to explain to me.
Okay.
What is a what is the appeal that you think is to from the Stooges, and obviously for some reason much more to men? Is it because is it as simple as because we're more aggressive and we just think it's funny a guy gets hurt? Because women oftentimes are even repulsed by the Stooges, let alone don't like it.
They don't like Laurel and Hardy either in general, too, they say.
So what is it do you think that made them so appealing? And I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I thought stood the test of time. You can kind of still watch them and laugh, but you're saying you do think that this newer generation of humans are less intrigued by this style of comedy. But what do you think made it work so well, and especially to men?
Well, for one thing, what I think works really well is that Curly is really funny. He
Yeah,
makes a lot, he's goofy, he's funny, he's full of energy, pre-stroke. And so I think he is funny. And Mo is, we love the classic authority figure who is not really in control, who's not as smart as he thinks he is, who's kind of dumb, but, is sure of everything. We like that. And then there's Larry, just providing the balance and the break between the two. And I don't think women like him because how think about the women in the Stooges movie. There aren't any. Essentially, sometimes they're trying to date someone. Occasionally they're married. Usually they're not even married. Even like Laurel and Hardy had domestic films, but the Stooges are not domestic. They are not, they don't really live in a world of women if you think about their films. Sometimes they're trying to impress a woman, sometimes they work for a woman who owns a house and they're plumbers and all. But so really, women are not a factor in their movies. And it's sort of like that's like saying, well, if it's a women's film, guys can't like it, or guys, women don't like guy films. That's certainly not true. But certain things appeal more to one another, and I think it's like the added. If you look at the Stooges' first film was called The Woman Haters. It was a film in rhyme, their first short on their own, and it's about guys that pledge that they will never date a woman or do anything with a woman, and then of course all three of them like find themselves falling for a woman, and trying to hide it. But essentially, I think the lack of participation of women in their comedy is a major key. And also, it is just really it's funny though, because it's really rough and tumble slapstick, but women will watch Chaplin all the time, and he's just as rough, particularly in his earlier films. And, but women like him. I think, well, he's also a Chaplin, aside from his makeup and all, was a handsome guy, as well. So I think they would like Chaplin.
Well, and it would seem to me that Chaplin also was an endearing character. In other words, he always made himself vulnerable and
Yeah.
somebody that you felt was real in a way.
And he always was doing something for a woman. He was trying to help people, like the
Yeah.
blind.
So you felt you see the Stooges are like a cartoon.
Yeah,
They
the Stooges are a cartoon. I think you summed it up perfectly right there.
Yeah, you just you take them for what they are, this odd thing that integrated into your reality and said, "What is this anarchy?" And then they disappear, and you're like, "What was that all about?" They're like like vandals or something. They
Yeah.
just kind of
Oh,
get
exactly.
you know
They'll come into your house and they'll wreck your house and then they're gone.
they're gone, and it's and but I like the other thing I was going to tell you or ask you about. Uh, was this interesting observation you made. And it's why you're a screenwriter, because you have to be able to think very specifically about why characters work in a story. You have to understand that. And you made it very clear that, well, clearly none of it would work without all three of them because they all served a role.
Yeah,
But you said Larry Fine uh, was almost the most essential because it sounds to me what you're telling me, and I'm going to let you summarize instead of me doing it for you. Is you have Curly on one side of the teeter totter, and you have Mo on the other side, and you need somebody in the middle to try to keep them
yeah,
stabilized. And it sounds to me like he's almost the straight man, even though he took as many hits as
yeah,
anybody else.
yeah. Yeah, he is the balance between the two.
Yeah.
Their comedy would be incredibly redundant and burn itself out without him, you know. So hopefully someone who writes a book about Larry Fine will approach me and look at my research. You know, I don't know if there's been a book about him.
Is he your favorite stooge?
No, it's got to be Curly. And I tell you also too, one of the problems with the Stooges is when they started making films in the 30s at Columbia. I mean, they were at Columbia their whole career, but they actually had decent budgets, you know, 19, I think 36, 37, 38 and all. But by the late 40s and the 50s, these were threadbare shorts, you know, and they looked it, you know, and they were just repeating ideas that they had previously used, you know. But some of their earlier shorts had nicer budgets, bigger, you know, sets, and yeah, and you know they were just better because of production. And also something too that's missing from comedy today is business. You know what they used to call business. You know, it's sort of like you have a script, you know what you're going to do in the scene, but then you may have some sort of prop on the set and you milk the prop, you know. And you were talking about how Seinfeld would milk a single idea, you know. It's sort of like in the pawn shop with Chaplin, you know, is short from 19, I believe 16. um, Somebody brings in a clock. He's at a pawn shop and he's behind the counter, and they bring in this clock and to get some money on it, and he ends up destroying, you know, he just works on that clock, and it's hilarious. It's like 5 minutes of him like looking and examining this clock and absolutely destroying it. But it's like, you know, that wasn't all written out. That was business that they, you know, they took the time on the set to think, well, what can be funny? You know, and a lot of shorts, particularly the teens, the 20s, the 30s, they were occupational shorts. It's like, okay, we're going to be, you know, the star or the team, we're going to be firemen. So what are all the jokes? You know, what's funny in a firehouse? We're going to be policemen. What's funny about that? What are their props? What does a policeman carry? We're going to be chimney smith, you know, chimney cleaners or something like that. And then you just think of all the business that you could have with that. And that was really disappointing to me because I went out, we did this film, Holy Man Undercover, which had some great actors in it. It had Fred Willard, the late Fred Willard, who I you know, I always so admired his work. And he is the only actor I will say when it was a big deal when he was on the set. We only had him for 2 days, and but he was hilarious. And fortunately, none of his stuff got cut. But he, you know, when he first appeared on the set, he's like, "Are the writers here?" You know, that voice of his, "Are the writers here?" And Tim Radishak and I were like, "Yeah." And we came down, and he's like, "Hey, I just wanted to thank you. I really enjoyed the script. I think this is really good." He's the only actor in my entire career who said that, and to hear it from him, you know. And also, we also had Clint Howard in for a couple scenes too. And what I loved him on the electronic press kit, he's like, what I like to do is I like to come into a movie for a day or two, and I like just to throw strikes. You know, I like to have a script there and I can look at it and I'm like, yeah, I can score with this. I can throw strikes. And he said this was a script where we came in and we could throw strikes.
Nice.
But what disappointed me is, you know, the quickness of the budget. One of the reasons, and what I was looking forward to, is to be on the set, to find opportunities, to find business, and to improve things, to take advantage of the moment. But we were moving so fast, there was like no opportunity. It's like I loved that Fred Willard loved the script, but he's also a very famous improviser too. So if he had improvised, I would have been equally happy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, so I was really hoping we would have the opportunity to take advantage on the set, find, you know, particularly if there was some chemistry, to take it to the next level.
Right.
But their problem is, and I think, you know, maybe you don't battle it as much as in the stand-up world, is that Christian comedy is like death. you know.
Right. And the reason is because if it's prefaced with Christian,
Yeah,
it seems to create boundaries that don't work for comedy. If it's comic, you really can't have any boundaries. Now, that is not to say that it has to be crude or crass or language. Hey, the greatest comedy, and no one will argue this. No stand-up comic will argue this. It's harder to write clean than dirty. It's harder
yeah,
because the dirty is automatically going to get people tittering because you're already breaking taboos, which is what they say, though I don't even think that's even true anymore. There are no taboos when it comes to language in Western culture, it seems. But that initially was what was happening, was you were doing and saying what wasn't supposed to be said out loud in sophisticated company. And so that made us kind of laugh because we were like doing something naughty. And so it kind of primed the pump. So when you did your jokes, people could just jump in, but you just use the F word as a punchline, you get the big laugh. But my premise was, well, if you remove the words, the curse words, the crass words, is it still funny on its own? That's not to say curse words can't punch up a joke. They do. They
yeah,
simply do. But I would even tell comics, Sean, when I used to do the clubs, and they would come up to me. I had it happen numerous times. They would say, because they'd see my act, and I was just clean. And this is back in the 90s, so it wasn't, nearly as dirty and filthy as it is nowadays. But they would say, "Yeah, I've been thinking about cleaning up my act." I never asked them to. I never even said to them, "I notice you're dirty." I did my show, they did their show. But they saw how you can be funny, and they knew instinctively, I'm kind of cheating. I'm taking an easy way out. And again, I preface that with some of the great comics curse. To say that George Carlin couldn't write because is ridiculous. He was one of maybe the smartest stand-up that ever existed. But and Richard Pryor and so forth. So, but I think what I'm getting at is it's kind of like I, for, I forgot his name. E. E. Cummings, was it? The
yeah.
guy that didn't
Capitalize, use punctuation.
yeah, he didn't use punctuation properly and whatever. And that would be, I remember in an English class in school saying, everybody says, why should I have to punctuate? E. Cummings doesn't, this famous guy. And the teacher said, yeah, but the thing is, if he wanted to or had to, he could.
Yeah,
He has the skill set. He's chosen to go this direction. It's not because he's illiterate. He chose to make this his calling card. So I think that uh, uh, it's interesting to me, that we started with the Stooges, and again, it kind of was out of left field because I didn't know that was part of it, but I thought it would be interesting to discuss, especially because I found myself not as big of a fan. And I was trying to think, well, heck, maybe I can you sit on your psychological couch and you can help talk me through why they weren't as interesting to me. Fred Willard, we had the same agent for a small time, and I got to spend one night with him at the Improv in Melrose. And yeah, great guy, great actor. Loved him in Fernwood Tonight to show my age, but incredible at improv. And I guess this is a perfect time, I guess, to start moving into where I thought the majority of this conversation would take place, and that is in screenwriting in general. Now, you've done a lot of screenwriting. How many scripts have you, let's just make it even easier. How many scripts have you had produced?
well, feature films 14, and I'm co-creator of a streaming series that's not out yet, but I did not write any of it. I'm just a
Okay.
co-creator,
Okay.
and but I've also written a lot of other stuff. I have a couple books out. Hey, look, there's a poster for one of them behind me, and they were traditionally published, but then my publisher went out of business. So now
Ah,
I'm putting them. I'm having to self-publish them. That's a novel,
publishers.
and I have a memoir. Oh, look, I just happen to have a copy of it. Now I got to get this back up online because my publisher had published that as well.
Okay.
I feel very blessed that, I'm not a famous person and that they thought my story was interesting enough that they would publish it as a real book.
Well, it is interesting, though. I mean, the truth is, you've done a hard thing. Um, there's a lot of funny people on this earth. Very few of them are stand-up comics. There's a lot of great actors in this earth. Very few of them are famous.
Yeah,
In other words, most of the great talent that has existed on earth was probably never seen because the people just didn't go into the world of acting or couldn't do the hard part. All I can really speak about from experience is stand-up comedy. People said, "Yeah, my friends should. I should have been a stand-up. I always want to be a stand-up comic." And my thought is, no, you didn't. Because if you wanted to be a stand-up comic, first off, you would have got out there and done it, and more importantly, you would have been willing to suffer the slings and arrows of people hating you on stage and still coming back the next day and saying, "I don't care. I'm still good at this and I'm going to keep it up." And that's the hard part is the rejection. If you are an actor, if you are a screenwriter, if you are a author, you had better get used to the two-letter word no,
yeah.
because that's what you're going to get 99 times before you ever find somebody to finally say yes. So let's get
Let's
to,
get to the nose.
yeah, let's get,
Okay, I can tell you one thing. I did a blog and I kind of did this for myself too. It's called Persistence. And because I read that John Hughes wrote 20 scripts before the first one was produced. And he was a successful writer because he was writing for National Lampoon. If you're a comedy writer, writing for National Lampoon is a pretty good place to be. But it was 20 scripts before he got his first one produced. So I listed all the scripts I had worked on. I had written, and it was before my first production, and or books because I also wrote some books, and it was 30. I think it was 34. I wrote 34 scripts, and I got it. I got to say, my second script got me genuine Hollywood attention, and my third script was eventually CAA wanted to handle it. It was not initially at the time I wrote it; it was a little later, and I turned them down.
why is that?
Because also my like sixth script was being picked up by a boutique literary agent, a guy named Stu Robinson. It was Robinson, Weintraub, and Gross, and they later formed Paradigm, which is a big agency now. And he loved this script I wrote called The Long Drive. And at the same time, I was pitching this other script, that my third script that CIA was interested in, and I said, well, look, here's my dilemma, because this guy loved this script. He called me at 9 a.m., here in Baltimore. And I'm talking to him. He's telling me how much he loved the script and he wanted to handle it. And I'm sitting there thinking, I said, wait a minute, you're in Los Angeles, right? He's like, yeah. I go, it's 6 a.m. there. He goes, yeah, I know. I wanted to call you. So, he had me won over automatically. And I go, well, here's my problem. This was the assistant to a person I'm not even going to I will name later in a second. But I go, they're interested in another script of mine called Then the Judgment, which was a horror script. And he goes, can you FedEx me, back in the days of FedEx, can you FedEx me that script? And I sent it to him. I FedExed it to him. And he called me the next day. And he goes, Sean, this is a really good script too. He goes, but the script that I had sent him, The Long Drive, was about a former president in a relationship with a Secret Service agent. It was a character-driven piece, and it was, what my agent considered my wheelhouse was drama with comedy. And this is what kills me in any screenwriting contest. Why I don't do them, because my comedies are all too dramatic to compete with straight comedies in a contest, and my dramas are all too funny to compete with dramas. So, but that's what he considered character. And in fact, I sent him an action script years later, and he goes, Sean, this is a really good script. I really like it. And I was talking about something about some chase scene. He goes, Sean, I just want to tell you something. Anyone can write a chase scene. Your strength is character. So I love this guy, but what he said about the horror script was, he goes, Sean, if this is your first script that's produced, you're going to be typecast in the horror genre and you'll never be able to get out. He goes, but if The Long Drive gets produced, he goes, this is the kind of work that you sustain a career on. And he's like, you will be able to do assignment work because people will look at you as a character writer. So I went with that. And I tell you what, years later, I like literally like 5 or 6 years later, I was out in Los Angeles and I met two people who had read The Long Drive. They were introduced to me. This is my friend Sean Murphy. And they're like, are you the Sean Murphy who wrote The Long Drive? Literally, I was out there for a weekend and two people I just met at random read that script. And it never happened because that movie Guarding Tess came out, which was Shirley MacLaine as a first lady and her relationship with Nicolas Cage, her secret. That sort of killed that script for a number of years, and it nearly came back in the 2010, And I'm actually letting a friend of mine rewrite it. I'm like, this needs to be updated. It would sell, and I just don't have the time to do it. So a friend of mine's rewriting it. But that's essentially when I got my big agent. And it was really the first person, this Long Drive script, the first person he sent it to was Barry Levinson because he's also from Baltimore, the Oscar winner. And he was pitched, he was pitching it to Levinson because shows how old I am. Paul Newman and Tom Cruise wanted to do another movie together after they had done Color of Money. And he was pitching to Levinson that this would be a great script for Cruise to play the Secret Service agent and Newman to play the president. So I mean, considering the movies I made, the early stuff I sent to Hollywood was like all like potential A-list stuff. I didn't help when my agent would say, "Hey, I love this script. Who do you see in the lead?" And my answer was almost always William Powell, you know.
Yeah,
He's
right.
like, "Sean, someone who is still alive." But I loved William Powell, the way he could do drama and comedy. So it was always whoever I wanted was always William Powell.
Do you think that to part of being successful in writing a script is to kind of picture in your mind who you think should be playing the character? Does that help you by hanging your hat on, this is what I see Paul Newman. I loved him in, HUD or whatever, and this is what I see, or or do you do it on after the fact, like, yeah, I think he could do it, or do you literally try to it helps you formulate the character based on how these guys can act.
Usually it comes afterwards, but here's one time with the director of my first film, 21 Eyes. Now he was a TV. I knew him when he was a commercial director because my background's advertising, and his name's Lee Bonner. And we wrote a couple scripts together, and we came really close with this one script before a strike, and we pulled and he and we could have made that movie, but Lee was like, I have an idea for another script we should write. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, I want to stop this other one. I'm like, oh, really? And it's like, and it's about a former spy who's like, he's out, and his past life comes back to haunt him. And he goes, and I only want to do it if we can get Michael Caine. And I'm like, okay. Because he wanted to play on Michael Caine with that Harry Palmer character because this director Lee Bonner loves spy films and spy stuff. So we wrote a script with the intention of called Out of the Cold, that we would only do it if we could get Michael Caine. And you know what? We came so close because he was handled by Gersh. I don't know who had Caine, but Lee was handled by Gersh Agency, and they were able to. We got it to. We got it to Kane's agent, and the agent approved it. And then it went to Kane's manager, and Kane's manager approved it. And they're like, Michael Caine will read it over those were Christmas holidays. He goes, Michael Caine will read it over the Christmas holidays. So after the Christmas holidays, it's like Michael Caine declined it. So like the film is dead. But at that point, Lee and I decided, well, we're going to write a script that we can just produce on our own, which was first film, 21 Eyes. And I think in many ways, the best of them. It's a really strange kind of, but it's a mystery, but it's mainly a comedy. You can tell, mysteries, you can't tell if they're working. You don't know if people are figuring it out. You can't sit in the audience and see if people are figuring it out. But if it's a joke and people laugh, the
Yeah.
movie's working, and there's stuff that isn't funny unless you're really paying attention.
Mm.
And if people are catching those jokes that are, who a lot of the roles in it, it's about this film called 21 Eyes is about what was odd about it is that there's no forward story. It's about these two cops who are given there's a robbery, a violent robbery. Two people are killed. One person's finger was cut off, and to steal this expensive diamond, and the diamond was recovered, and everything seems to be fine. And so it's an open and shut case. The robbers are all dead, and the heroes of it are these two detectives who are given the task of watching the security cameras of the robbery, and there were 21 different cameras around the building, and just notating that they would watch them. But as they watched the tapes, they discovered that it was not an open and shut case, that there was a lot more going on there than met the eye. And the thing is, you never see the detectives. You only see the TV screen that they're looking at. So when they pull a tape out, you remember in the old VHS days, the screen would like go blue. So a
Yeah.
lot of they would take the tape out, the screen would go blue, and you could always hear them talking. And they're like, "I'll put this other one in." And they're labeling, and there's jokes about how they're labeling the tapes because there's all this big pile of tapes, and they're trying to keep track of which ones they've seen and which ones they haven't, and then they want to go back and look at some other ones once they see something else. And if the audience is laughing about the labeling stuff, we know that they're highly engaged by the movie. But there's a lot of other jokes. We had Steve Buscemi is a great voice, but his brother Michael Buscemi, it has the same exact voice. And as a voice actor, we had the two main voice actors was Fisher Stevens, who's an actor that's pretty well known and won an Oscar as a documentary producer, and he had done a TV show with Lee. So Fisher was in it, and we got his counterpart Michael Buscemi, who sounds just like his brother. It's like getting Steve Buscemi for scale, but he was actually funny. But because they were in the booth doing the stuff, they didn't even know what were jokes, which was perfect.
Right.
And like it was freaking Michael Buscemi out because he would be in there and he would read a line, and all of us in the control room would crack up, and he didn't know it was a joke. And he's
Yeah.
like, "Did I do something wrong?" I go, "No, no, no,
Yeah.
perfect, perfect." But because he didn't know what was a joke and what wasn't, he it was the best experience I ever had making a movie. It was just so much fun,
Well,
and
and I
still
that's
enjoy watching that movie. And unfortunately, it's currently not screening. The director kind of wants it off the market because he wants to redo it with bigger names as the voiceover talent. So,
interesting.
you know,
Well, I think that's also kind of interesting, though, because it kind of points to some of the technique uh, when it comes to writing, because it's hard. And like you just said, you kind of don't know if something's working until people let you know by screening it. It's just like stand-up comedy. I've always said this. It's the only performance art I know that you have to rehearse in front of the audience, because the only way you can know if your jokes is working, if it's funny, if the timing is right, if you have to fix it, replace it, edit it, is the audience. They'll laugh or they won't. If they don't, you either have to decide this isn't funny, or B, I didn't do it right, or C, the setup's too long, or D, I waited, I was too quick with the punch. There's so many little intricacies of perfect balance to make a joke work that nobody knows. Because once a joke works,
yeah,
it feels very obvious. When you do a joke and it works, it just seems so obvious and so simple that it's like, well, yeah, it's funny because it's obviously that's a funny thing. And they don't know, yeah, but 80 times I had to do that until I learned pause one more second
yeah,
or change that word. Nobody knows you're doing that on stage. They don't have to watch that rigorous difficulty. And so with a screenwriting, I'm thinking to myself, wow, in some odd way, you don't even get to do an adjustment. At least when I'm doing a live new joke I'm experimenting with, I can kind of in real time begin to feel it out. And I'm good enough now that I can kind of feel why didn't it work and try to make an adjustment. Once you film something and you screen it and the joke falls flat, you're kind of like, there's nothing we can do because we've already filmed this movie. So when you go to start making a movie. Let's start with this because I'm sure people might be out there who want to be screenwriters, or maybe they've written things, or maybe they've submitted and got them, rejected, or maybe they bought them. I don't know. But let's just kind of help people who might be engaged in this world or interested in it. How do you go about even starting? Is it literally as simple as you're driving down the road and you see some guy doing something, you go, trash truck guy, you go, what's the secret life of a trash truck guy? What if he's really a spy? And you just start creating stuff in your mind just for your own entertainment, and then something comes out of that. Obviously, if somebody hired you and say, "Can you write us a story about?" That's
Yeah.
different. But when you're starting from whole cloth, what is your muse? What ignites the fuse of a new story?
Well, for like the long drive, the one that was my calling card in Hollywood, and it's sort of the one my agent, even after the script was dead, after Garden tests, would still send out and say, "Hey, this is a good writer. Take a look at this guy." Um, that was had gotten a new car, and for vacations, I used to just drive aimlessly. I would decide how much money I was going to spend, and I would just drive to places I'd never been, with no goal in mind. And once I ended up in this small town, and I'm like, boy, this is such a small town. I wonder if anyone ever famous had been here. And I'm thinking, well, who would be the most famous person that could come to this town? And I'm like, well, the one person everybody knows is the president. So I'm like, and that got me thinking, well, what if the president came to this town? And I said, well, he'd have to have his Secret Service guys with him. But then there's always in my best work, there's always a personal aspect. I would say that my early screenwriting career was always because I had I had broken up with a girlfriend. You know how that can be, very serious relationship, and I always felt like I have to restart my life now. So if you look at like the protagonist in like my successful work that the agents liked, none of it's been produced yet. It's always about people, F. Scott Fitzgerald said there's no second acts in American lives. But that's what all my scripts were about, or people. And in this case, it was a president who didn't run for reelection because he didn't like being president. It just wasn't, it wasn't what he thought it would be. And the Secret Service agent was someone who was disillusioned because he did what he was supposed to do. He stopped a bullet for a foreign leader visiting the UN, but then that leader went back and killed a bunch of people,
Mm.
murdered them because they felt they were behind the plot. So he's like, I'm responsible for all these people getting murdered, and they got a president who's disillusioned. So it was these two people who are like looking to restart their lives who happen to be together. And most of my scripts were like that, at that time, were people restarting their lives because that's where I was in my life at that time. And one script, one of my faith-based, well, Hidden Secrets, the first faith-based one, was a lot about that, personal relationships. Now, I wrote that with somebody, and he didn't even know how personal that script was to me because I'm not saying like, this is how this was with me and this and that. The story has to work whether it's personal to you or not. But, what I've discovered in all the things I've worked at were, in a sense, the things that are most real to you emotionally are the things that resonate most with the audience. And I remember going to, it's hard to get a laugh, but it's harder to get people to cry. I don't think that's something you can even aim for. I mean, you'd see the movie like My Dog Skip or whatever, and at the end they're throwing everything in but the kitchen sink, when the dog's going to die, and to cry, and eventually, of course, everyone does. But on like Hidden Secrets, I took my kind of cynical nieces, they were both in their teens, to a film festival that was playing it in Pittsburgh. And my nieces were just looking around there was a scene and everybody in the theater was crying. And they're like, Uncle Sean, people are sobbing. I go, yeah, I know. And I continued to do that with these. You would think that these scripts were like commissioned scripts, that they were the other people's ideas, but you have to. Oftentimes, these ideas I'm given to write scripts about are only like 3 paragraphs long, or less. Sometimes I'm given more detailed treatments too, as you may know. But on probably the most successful film that I've done was called The Encounter, and I had put a lot of personal stuff in there, and stuff that I never even told my wife, stuff that I decided to write my memoir about later. And it was easy to type this stuff, but when I went to a film festival in Boston for its premiere, and when I'm watching it, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that. But the more personal stuff it was, because everybody's looking in entertainment, whether it be music or movies or even comedy. They're looking for something that resonates with them. And you're not going to resonate with your audience unless it's real to you. That's my philosophy. And lately, because of all the strikes and everything, and the film business essentially shut down for a while. And it's coming back very slowly because of the mergers and uncertainty. And I've been writing songs since the early 80s, and I devoted the last year and a half essentially to music. And what I love about music is that it's purely emotive, you
Yeah.
know. And and now I'm using artificial, people hate me. I'm using artificial intelligence to realize some of these songs because to me, it's the lyrics that are important. More so than the music, it's the lyrics. I'm a screenwriter. I'm used to writing something, handing it over to somebody who realizes it, and then I'm like, oh, don't like that. Oh, I love that. Oh, don't like that.
Mhm.
It would always be better if it was what was in my head. But when suddenly you have a big crew and the directors and producers and actors, it's never going to be what's in your head. You know,
Right.
but it's funny, I'm not saying I'm making any money in the music, but I am, I know people have, have bands and have stuff and they have it on Spotify and all these places and not making any money. I'm making a tiny amount. But the thing is, people are actually, even to make a tiny amount, that means thousands of people are listening to your
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Well,
You
but
know,
it's all storytelling though, right? I
yeah,
mean, a
a lot
song
of
is a
stories.
story, and a film is a story, and a play is a story. And obviously, it doesn't work unless people connect to it. It
Yeah.
just it can't. It's kind of like one of the things you'll hear all the time in stand-up. And again, it's my only sort of connection to your writing.
You're a fine actor too, Brad. I want you to know that that uncle character was really strong and really real. I'm not just saying that because you're on here. I think I've probably told you that when we were off camera previously during our relationship.
Well, that's very kind of you, and I appreciate that. And I certainly wasn't fishing for compliments. What I was getting at was that um, if you do a comedy bit and people laugh, oftentimes you'll hear them say, "Oh, that's so true."
Yeah.
Oh, that's so true. Or, oh, that's happened to me. Or, oh, I've thought of that. So they kind of give you the clue that if somebody can put themselves in those shoes, then it makes sense to them and they're going to respond to that. So so you've made it clear that you're just like I guess all of us who write in whatever genre, something just clicks. A moment happens. You're driving through a town. You go, wait, I wonder if there's been a famous guy here, or perhaps you see a little artifact and you go read the plaque and it said, Al Capone. You go, that's interesting, and it starts crafting something in your head. But not everybody can do it. Not everybody has the ability to write. So when you are starting a new screenplay or commissioned, is it an excitement or is it daunting?
Well, if I'm writing something for myself, it's always exciting. Because it's a story I feel I have to tell. And I'm not a guy who works a lot when I'm working on my own stuff with like outlines and things like that. I will generally usually feel I have a strong opening and I will usually know how it ends. And then to me, it's an adventure to see how the character gets there. And to me, like when you outline stuff completely, it's sort of like, you're taking the thrill of this. I mean, there's still this thrill of discovery of actually outlining it and seeing the story take place. But to me, I like that to happen in the writing process. And usually, the most daunting thing about commissioned work is if you don't have much time to do it.
Okay.
And
But do you feel restricted? In other words, if you are gun for hire, the good news is at least you know what you're supposed to accomplish because like you said, if you're creating something from scratch, you kind of aren't quite sure where it's going. You just have a germ of an idea and then you almost let it write itself, which I think is what you're implying is that there is a muse to this. Historically, this is what people used to say before they started thinking it was God, right?
yeah,
Is that there's some something out in the ethers that is talking to you. Say this, do this, because you don't know where it came from. And I hear that probably more in songwriting than anything.
Yeah.
Is they just, I don't know. 20 minutes. I wrote this song. I don't know where it came from. The most classic example is Yesterday
Yeah.
with Paul McCartney, the most covered pop song in history. And it was in a dream. And he walked around saying to people, does this sound, because it must be a song I heard because it just was given to me. Nobody
Yeah.
heard it. He wrote it down, and he can't tell you how he did it. So there's something mystical and transcendent about writing because Sean, you're creating a world ex nihilo.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist, and now it does. It's kind of like procreating like God did with in reality with us. You're creating another world. Of course, it comports to something we all connect to, or it won't make any sense. But do you ever feel like, and you're a Christian, so maybe it's a little too on the nose, but do you ever feel like God is kind of speaking to you that there is this almost beautiful, amazing, revelatory information that you're writing it, going, where does this come? Like I'm being entertained by this information like it's not even mine. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do, sir. I do certainly feel that way. It's particularly, and I want to say something. I've been writing. I became in the faith-based market after Hidden Secrets, the first one I did. Suddenly you're making a lot of them. But I've been working. My second script was an end times movie before even like Left Behind. I would have invented Left Behind, the whole genre at the time. Had that script called The Mark been made. But I've been dealing with religious themes throughout this time when A-list people were reading my scripts and enjoying them because there was no faith-based genre. So if it was a story that was good, they liked it. And the religious aspect would sometimes, spiritual aspect would just give the characters greater depth. But nowadays, that doesn't exist anymore because if they see God or Jesus, they're like, oh, this is a faith-based film. Oh, we can only spend, $14 million on it, and with the hope of this, and we'll have to get the churches to support it. So we can't say anything controversial or anything. But I mean, that's the business aspect and people's perceptions. But I do feel like that area of creation, because you're when you're writing something and sometimes literally, like with the encounter stuff, you're speaking for God. You have a character who is God. It's scary if you're not if you're not, a good Christian, if you're not in communion with God. I mean, that's really intimidating, because
Intimidating in trying to be, you mean intimidating in trying to measure up to
yeah, to measure
the
up.
responsibility, or almost like, how dare I delve into speaking for God? Like this is almost heretic, blasphemous. Uh,
Both, both. Yeah.
yeah.
So you really, you really have to be in communion, I think, to really pull that off. And that's why if there's Christian themes in something, they're looking for someone who's a Christian writer. Because I'll tell you what, I've known a few writer friends of mine who are not Christians, but they're like, wow, there's money in this Christian market. Look at this script of mine, and they try to write a Christian script, but and I tell them, I said, no, 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 no one's ever going to buy this because anyone who reads it will know that this is not, this is a
But
copy.
isn't that what Hollywood tried to do with Noah, for example, where they had an atheist director who was trying to put his spin on it and somehow make it, uh, he felt, have substance? Like,
Yeah.
give me some examples of faith-based that clearly were secularly driven and completely were oblivious to
Well,
the
some of them
fact.
were good though, like The Omen,
Okay.
the horror movie. I think the best place, if you're not making faith-based films, but you want to discuss faith, horror is the genre. That's why, I have like this book on Chapel Street. It deals with deep spiritual issues throughout the entire book. But there, yeah, you can tell, and a lot of, I hate to criticize the work of Christian writers, directors, and things,
Well, I
but
don't know that it's criticism
that
as
are doing bad jobs or
well, but what do okay, but this
narrow in the sense that
no, but
they may be more denominational based. They may have some.
well, Sean, but this is important actually. And obviously we're not here to disparage people's work or whatever. I don't mean it like that or to
We'll do
be
that offline.
yeah, but yeah, and we have on many occasions. But no, the reason I'm saying this though, I think this is an important element to this conversation though, is that there's a difference between judgment in a self-righteous
Mhm.
uh 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 presupposition like I get to decide what is worthy of faith-based or whatever, but that's different than assessing the
The
craft.
quality.
Well, you know, if you can't do that, then we can't do anything. Is the milk bad or not?
Yeah.
It's that easy. You
Yeah.
smell it and you go, it's rancid. You know, that's that. I'm not going to
I don't
drink
want
it.
to hurt. I don't want to hurt the milk's feeling.
Yeah, right. But I mean, so again, I don't want it to be, and I don't mean it in that regard, but uh, I feel like it's fair to try to we're trying to raise the bar. I mean, shouldn't Christians be the best screenwriters, the best actors, the best producers, the best directors, the best artists, the best sculptors? Shouldn't we be the best representing the creator of all things? So if you have um, issue with quality, why don't you bring some of these up and not it only to so that those watching right now or listening on Spotify or iTunes on Life Audio, you know, why didn't script A work, or why do you feel like it missed the mark? So that the next generation doesn't do that. They're going to bring in the highest ranking writing skills they can. So let's take it apart and see what is missing, so that we don't repeat the same mistakes.
Well, I'm trying not to repeat the same mistakes, and I will say that I had a time where I was extremely busy writing faith-based scripts, and mostly for one company, but I had other opportunities as well. And I kind of stopped writing them. Some of it was disillusionment with people in the business, and some of it was I've told this story before. I'm telling the same story over and over again, and I wrote. Here's the funny thing: I think I've become more of an elder statesman in the faith-based film business after essentially like walking away from it because I wrote this blog. And if you look it up, it's called Building the Faith-Based Ghetto, about how we boxed ourselves in and how faith-based films aren't doing what we say they're doing. Because if you talk to any faith-based filmmakers, writer, or whatever, we're trying to reach people for the Lord, but we are not. We are making films to entertain Christians. And we're
Mhm.
telling the salvation story over and over and over again, but it's just our way of saying, aren't we better than the world?
Mm.
You know, and if you just look at who is seeing the movies, even the ones that make $100 million, that audience is 90% Christian. So why are we telling stories about people coming to Christ if our audience is 90% Christian? Why don't we tell stories that deal with problems in the church and problems in the Christian walk that will help people move forward in their faith? So, my thing is essentially the business model that we present is false. I was going to say a lie, but let's just say it's false. We are a film like The Encounter that I made saw a people that changed lives. The first night it played, it was at a festival where you're supposed to bring a secular friend, and you know, they had a altar call afterwards, and 200 people came up to accept Christ out of that audience. And you would say that's good, and I don't take any pride in that because I know that you know, I didn't bring those people to the movies. I wasn't the one who was working on their hearts for like 2 or 3 years before, so that when they saw this movie they would come forward. So it's sort of like anytime anyone comes to the Lord, it's not because of what one person said or did or what one movie said or did. But I was glad I was able to be used to do that. Now when that movie came out, it was on Netflix originally, And they did not say faith-based in the description. It was like supernatural, this and that. And people were seeing it because people thought it was a horror movie, from the description and the art. And it was changing lives. And for years, I'm getting like messages. I try to take every friend request on Facebook and Twitter and all because you could tell where the movie was playing because people were reaching out to me. And I would get things like, I saw your movie a couple years ago. I became a Christian. And I just want to say I'm now a minister. I've just graduated from seminary and things like that. But that's because the movie was out in the public world. But then they took all of those films I did, including Marriage Retreat and Sarah's Choice, and they put them on Christian services, a Christian streaming service. So no non-Christian is ever going to see them. So don't tell me, oh, we have this Christian streaming service to reach people for the Lord. No, because people who need the Lord aren't going to put their credit card down to watch these things. But fortunately now, a lot of these early films of mine are all up on Tubi and places like that. They're all out in the world again where people can actually see them and they could do some good. But my view is if our quote unquote Christian films are only being seen by Christians, let's do something that could find Christians in their walk.
Right, right, right.
And I did a blog where I deal with why Christian films are bad. I think it's like why Christian films are bad. It was a response to a video somebody did on YouTube. And so I wrote this blog and people have these lame excuses like, oh, it's low budget. And I'm like, that's not a reason why a film is bad. Because it's like, what's his name? Kevin Smith did Clerks on like, $5,000. And literally Primer, one of my favorite science fiction films, was done on film for $5,000. That was their hard budget, and those are great movies, so don't tell me, Christian films are
So
bad.
what are they missing? What are the Christian films that when they're failing your your criteria for what makes something work or not? And
Well,
you have
here,
the right to do that. You have the right to assess that. You're a successful screener. Somebody's got to be able to pick this apart with some expertise. What are they missing?
here's the thing. People will get this inspiration to say, Lord wants me to make a film. So they write a film, and they go to their church, they get all the people who were in the Christmas pageant or the Easter pageant, and they get a camera and they get a guy to hold the boom, and they make a movie because the Lord told them to make a movie. Now the thing is, if the Lord told you to become a doctor, you wouldn't buy a scalpel and start operating on people the next day. You would know you have to go to medical school and learn how to be a doctor, but people don't see the need. They feel that the Lord told them to do it, so they're going to be successful. And then there's the one soul rule. If this movie reaches one soul, it was worth being made. And my response to that is like, yeah, that's true. But imagine if you did it well, and then wouldn't just reach one soul, it could
Yeah.
reach a million
Well,
souls.
and what if it was your fault that it didn't reach 5 souls? What if it
Yeah,
was your incompetence that kept it from reaching 100? I mean, we never want to take, God's the one that gives us the marching orders,
yeah,
but we never want to take blame when it fails. So, I mean, are you blaming God? He told me to write this and
yeah.
it didn't work. Well, I guess God didn't come to the table and anoint it like he promised. And I think that's a great example, what you just said, analogy of, if you might be called to be a filmmaker, you might feel as a call to theater and film because Sean, the oldest the oldest form of communication to humans that had depth and substance and meaning and teleology was storytelling. That's
Yeah.
how we've always to describe to the next generation our tribe, the great hunt we did 200 years ago when the tribe was about to die from the blizzard and that great winter, and the 10 bisons came from nowhere and we killed. Let's never forget that story, because it changed our life. So storytelling, including the first story, is how God has always communicated and had us communicate. So to screenwrite, to be an author of a book is sacred.
Yeah.
You're continuing the line of how humans remember who we are and why we're here. So that's why I said to you, I think that there is an maybe a necessity for Christians to be held much more accountable if they are saying they're representing God, because it's kind of like when you said I was almost hesitant to write a story that where God was speaking because I felt such a weight of responsibility to say this is God's words. Well, shouldn't we feel that same weight of responsibility if we claim to be telling a story and creating it in a genre, in a type of format like filmmaking that has a need for certain lighting to be proper, for the audio to be heard, for the camera to be focused, for the actors to be competent, for the story to make sense? Shouldn't we expect that from Christians when the greatest book of all time, the Bible, still is still is the bestseller because the storytelling held up? So I just feel like we do ourselves and God a disservice when we're hesitant to call out, hey, brother, love you. You aren't good at this yet. Either get better or go find what you're called to. I think that is a necessity.
Well, here's a couple things. One, um, Christians, part of the problem is the audience. Their audience isn't demanding better films, and because they judge films on the ideas in them rather than the actual execution. But here's the thing, like bad filmmakers, and I hate to use that term, but people who aren't as skilled as they might be later feel they are immune to criticism, because if anyone criticizes their film, they'll say, use that passage, they condemn, if they persecute you, they persecuted me first. If the world hates you, it's because of me. So if I don't like your Christian film, I am doing the work of the Antichrist.
You're right.
No, I've heard that, and people defending people, bad filmmakers, and they're like, don't listen to them. That's the voice of the Antichrist. And I'm like, okay, gosh, I'm gonna check and see if I got that 666,
Right.
somewhere. But so they're immune to criticism because they feel they've done the Lord's work.
Yeah.
And it's like, take the time to learn the craft.
Yeah.
I took a long time to learn to write
Well,
screen.
let's tap into that since we're kind of we've gone over an hour, and I appreciate your time, but
Hey,
and I
we'll go
love
6 hours. Why not? Let's
yeah,
go.
yeah, no, and I'm grateful that you're available because I think this has been a great interview. We've really covered a lot of important ideas. So, but I'm just thinking, and it's not this easy. I'm sure you could put on a conference or a seminar or whatever to teach screenwriting. Clearly, you have the credibility to do that. But if we were kind of to try to thumbnail summarize a few techniques, a few principles to people listening or watching right now who might want to do this. Can you give a little bit of a summary, like how one goes about, here's a few things you need to make sure are quite established and prepared before you start submitting your script or even finishing it? What are the qualities that are necessary for something to even pass muster as a legitimate screenplay?
Well, first, it's got to be technically correct, because people will dismiss you immediately if you're not using proper format. There's a ton of books out there. The one I used was Sid Field's Screenplay, which taught you the structure. But the structure, I mean, well, it taught structure as well, but it taught you formatting. And William Goldman, the dean of screenwriting, two-time Oscar winner, said screenplays are structure. They are probably the most structured kind of writing other than like haiku. I mean, you really have to be structured. And that is one thing, if I'm going to pat my back on this, because other people have said it to me, people who work with me said I am the king of structure, that,
And
things have to.
does structure simply mean the way it is written on the page so people can follow it properly, like it's
It's more
titled?
the structure of the story. Yeah, formatting is what you're seeing on the page. It's sort of like, 99% of scripts are three acts. Something has to happen by page three, something has to happen by page five, by 15, by 30, or by 30, you better be on, had the big movement into the second act. Second act goes, two-thirds of the script. I mean, two-quarters of the script, 60. Let's say if it's a 120-page script, first act is 30 pages, second act is 60 pages, last act is 30 pages. At the end of the second act, you have the big gloom, unless it has an unhappy ending, then you have the big triumph. And, you have to get those things right. Now, there's a book that's killing Hollywood called Save the Cat. And I say it's killing Hollywood because it's the Bible of screenwriting now. Every generation, there's a new Bible of screenwriting. And the problem is that it tells you what to do by each page, and people do it. And you're watching the movie, and I'm like, oh, they're saving the cat. Nothing surprises me when I'm watching the movie, because all movies are starting to be exactly the same. It's structurally in their movies and here's why. It's because a lot of these people who are making decisions on what movies to make are not movie people. They're like MBAs, they get hired by the studios to find ways to make money and this and that. And they don't have that instinct like a Jack Warner or Daryl Zanuck had, or even a Louis Mayer, and who viewed themselves as story, knew a story and wanted to tell a story. So they read this book, Save the Cat, and if a script follows that paradigm, well, they know it's a good script because it's just like the textbook. But eventually all the movies start to look the same, at least
So
to.
in some ways it hinders creativity in a way, or it kind
It,
of
def- it definitely does, because it doesn't give you any leeway to take diversions. And of course, I believe in structure, but I have a very a reader who's been reading my scripts. She's sort of my editor in a sense, and she's been reading my scripts since the '90s. And there'll be things, and she's worked for Oscar winners and things like that and all. So she's read a ton of scripts, and if she objects to something that she feels I'm going off on a tangent or this or that, I know if she objects to it, lots of people are going to object to it. The people who make decisions, some of them are going to object to it. And I've got to decide, is this important enough to me? Is this do I need this for this story because it's important, to the story and to what I'm trying to say? Or do I just cut it out just so that, that will be one less objection?
wasn't there the
Sometimes I
term?
say yes, sometimes I say no. You know,
Isn't there a term? I think I heard it from Stephen King, kill your darlings.
yeah.
You have to be able to, if you're really sold on an idea or thing, and for some reason it's not working now. I don't know if that's from your assessment or somebody else has said you got to get rid of this part, and you're like, no, I love that part. You have to be able to have the discipline to somehow go, okay, if you're telling me that this is somehow hindering it, and my emotional connection to this is not allowing me to see it clearly, then I have to trust you and cut it out. But that's hard to do, man, because like you said, you're writing stories that come from your life oftentimes, or your experiences. So maybe it feels almost like, but this is real, this is true,
Yeah.
I need to say this.
Well, this is my memoir. And what the original draft of my memoir was 100 pages longer. And my one friend was reading it, and she's like, and she cut on, it was for 400 pages. She cut it down to 300. And she was going through it with me. It's like, this is a great story, but it's not telling the story you're telling in the book. It goes, and then she becomes, this would be a great essay. You should use this as an essay, or this would be a great blog. But it's slowing down your story. You're losing focus by telling this story.
Mm.
And she did such a great job that when I sent it to the publisher, they were like, to pitch the story, they were like, one of the reasons we pitched it was because it was so close to completion. It's a good
Yeah.
story, and we knew we weren't going to have to edit it, spend a year going back and forth editing it. It's nearly done. And that editor at the publisher only like cut two things out of the book, two small things, because I killed so many of my darlings on it.
Yeah. But that
Yeah.
does make sense to you. So they went ahead and cut them out, and you accepted that. And how does an artist, you are, uh, decide to stand their ground and say, you know what? I'm sorry, guys. This is what I'm going to say, and and I need to. And when does one learn the courage and I guess the trust that sometimes you're missing it, and this is actually helpful to editing it this way.
Okay, I have two good examples of this. Now, Chapel Street is my book. I wrote the novel. The novel is my complete true vision of the story. And I call it it's a tale about a man battling a demonic entity that has been driving members of his family to suicide for generations. In my personal work, suicide, there's been a lot of suicide in my family. So it's a
Mhm.
common theme, and it's something I deal with a lot in my work. And it's about these two brothers. One of them killed themselves, and the demonic entity is sort of like masking himself as that person. And the surviving brothers dealing with a lot of survivor guilt. So to me, it's a story about brothers. Okay. So the first people that were interested in making it as a movie were like, we have money to make four movies, and we like your story, we like your script because I already had written a script. They're like, but we already have films with three male protagonists, and the last one we want to do with female. So are you willing to change the lead character to a female? And I'm like, it's a movie about brothers, but I guess it's a movie about a brother and a sister.
Mm, mm,
Now,
mm.
I did not feel bad about that because most of the themes will work through, but I have the book out. The book represents my true vision. If the movie's different, it doesn't matter as much to me because my vision was realized. Now, in the case, I wrote the script called I, John, which was a 2012 winner of the $50,000 Kairos Prize for screenwriting spirituality. So, it was the script that got me into the Christian film business. And when I optioned that to some people, and don't want to name their names. They're not the people you think they may be. And they made some changes. Like there was a lead doc. It's about a doctor who meets a person who seems to think that he's the Apostle John. And if you remember at the end of the Gospel of John, it said where he tells Peter, Jesus tells Peter, and Peter asks, "Well, what about the disciple?" Meaning the disciple that Jesus loved, who was John, the author. And he goes, "If I ask him to stay until I come back, what's that to you? You have to do what I'm asking you to do." So there's been a small minority of people who think that perhaps John never really died and he's still with us. And it's this guy, elderly man, makes a miraculous recovery and under anesthesia and things says that he's John. He gives his birth date as, whatever year it was and all. I had all those details in the script. So they changed the people who optioned it, because the political tides were changing. So they wanted to woke it up a bit, and so they took the lead doctor from male to female. They wanted me to make that change, and I'm like, my wife really objected because I kind of based it on a real doctor, and she's like, you can't change it. My wife's in the medical field, and I'm like, it doesn't hurt the story for the character to be a female. So I made the change. My wife didn't agree. So, and then everyone loved it. It's like, wow, such a strong female character. And I'm like, yeah, I took all the he's and changed them to search and replace from Samuel to Sarah.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, man, she's just like a guy.
yeah, yeah.
So, so that was it. Now, but it's a faith-based film, and there's a big miracle that ends the second act. Now, one of the producers of the film was like, you know, one thing I hate about Christian films is they all have miracles in them. These kind of miracles don't happen in real life very often. And I think we have to get rid of this miracle and have this woman die. And I'm like, are you now there are three partners in this company. One was the one who really owned the company. And then there was another one who was a screenwriter who knew this guy was crazy. And then there was this other guy. And so I'm like, I said, look, I've written a lot of these films. I've sat in the audience with a lot of these films. I go to a lot of Christian film festivals. I've seen more Christian films with audiences than you have. And I can tell you, if this woman dies, this movie dies with it.
Yeah,
And
right.
he's like, well, in real life. And I go, in real life? I said, this is about the Apostle John in a modern hospital. I know we're already suspending disbelief. To me, I said, you don't even know what type of movie this is. That would be like taking the Narnia books and saying, lions can't talk. Let's
Right.
get this Aslan character out of here.
Right.
I said,
Right.
this is a fantasy. It's a fantasy movie.
Well, it sounds like
If
you
you
are
want
saying,
to write, if you want to write a realistic Christian drama where there's no miracle at the end and someone dies, I am happy to write that movie for you. Tell me the general plot you want. I will deliver you that script in a month. But this movie will die if you do that.
yeah,
And when the chance came to option the movie again, I turned that I wouldn't make that change.
yeah.
And they had a director, and she made the change, and it was horrible. They gave her like a week. She had only been on the project for like 3 weeks, and then there was a conference call, and they blindsided me by, they gave me the script, and they didn't say the woman was going to be on there. They thought I was going to be talking with the producer about it, and then she's like, "Oh, we have," and then it's like we're starting to talk. Go, well, the director's here too, and she wants to hear it, and she was inexperienced, so. When I was criticizing her changes, I wasn't criticizing her.
Yeah.
I knew she had to. I'm not going to say what she had to do, but she had an incredibly difficult task and no
Yeah.
time to do it. And her changes did not work out in the context of the story either.
Right.
Even if you wanted to make that version of this story, it was done badly because she didn't have the time to do it.
Okay.
And boy, I offended her. Apparently, I really triggered her, and never wanted to speak with me again. Because I was so offensive to her. I was not offensive. Trust me.
Well,
I'm
but I
not going
think
to say
that's
the
what,
woman was a snowflake, but when the option came up, I said, look, I'm not going they're like, we're really close on this. I'm like, not going to renew it. I don't want to. I said, I will give you another option period, but only if we return to it where a previous version that I choose.
mm.
And if you want to do it, then we'll do it. And
It sounds to me, Sean, if I can summarize and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's a tone or there's an element of the foundation of what you think makes the story true and authentic that you can't change. It's just, I have to be true to what I want to say. If that means the character suddenly is a woman, maybe, or his name isn't Joe now, it's Fred, or he's black, or whatever. That doesn't really change the substance of the story. So that I can do. That's where I'll make some compromises. But I'm not going to allow you to literally rewrite what I was trying to create because that's the beauty. And there's something there's an integrity, I think, to the personal connection a writer has to their subject matter. It's mine. It's why if somebody says you're not funny or they don't like your joke, it's hard not to take it personally because I wrote that. I thought it was funny. I wanted to give it to all of you people in the hopes that you would join me
yeah,
in the enjoyment of this thing. And you're literally attacking me. Now they're not. They're attacking a joke, and you got to learn
yeah,
to accept that hard truth that people not everybody's going to like you. But the truth is, it is impossible to separate your feelings, your emotions, your persona from your writing because it's so personal. It is so much a part of it came from you. And so I think that is a difficult and challenging expectation to to differentiate between just a tweak here and there. And even practically, all right, if we make it a woman, you'll buy my script. All right, I could use the money. Why not? But I can't change. I don't know if sacred is a little bit over the top, but there does seem to be an authentic integrity to the story that you can't mess with because that's part of me, and you have no right to do that.
I will not. It's sort of like I'm the worst person to talk to because although I do want to make another film, I got interest in scripts right now. before the strikes, I literally had 3 films in development, and somebody wanted to actually develop a Netflix series about a haunting. See, this thing, Chapel Street, was inspired by a haunting my family experienced. They actually wanted to do a documentary series about what my family experienced, and strike killed all of that. And right now, people are starting to read again. I would love for some of the stuff that people are reading to get made.
Yeah.
However, it's sort of like if it doesn't get made, it's not going to kill me.
Well, who knows, Sean? I know some
Yeah.
folks. Maybe
Yeah.
we can pitch it together. I mean, I would love to do some more stuff with you. Well,
Yeah.
listen, buddy, I love this conversation. I
You
just got to
play
be fair to
poker?
you. What's that?
You play poker?
I do play poker. Yes.
Are you good at it?
Oh, I'm an amateur, but yes, I've played it.
I have a script for you to read then.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, yeah, absolutely. But your Chapel Street sounded interesting to me. I felt like that could
I'd
be.
love to do that one too. I could do a
Um, um,
series or as a movie or as a
yeah.
movie.
But listen, here's what we're going to do, and well, maybe we should do this again sometime because you've got a lot of information that I know is intriguing to people, and I'm sure a lot of people, if you are a Christian out there, you probably some of the references he made are like, oh, I saw that movie. So you can go look on him on IMDb and see what Sean Paul Murphy has written and done. He's a, I also have personal experience. He's a man of integrity, a moral man, and that's important in this business is too that you can trust people. So I'm going to leave one last question. It's for my subscribers. It's just a special little extra question that only those who are part of the Mighty 10,000 get. But because I do believe that you have a great authority to assess films and stories and so forth. And especially in the faith-based market, because you did try to raise the bar and do, um, tell stories that weren't necessarily as easily tied up in a bow like so many of the faith-based films want to be. Um, I think I want to ask you this. What would you say of all the faith-based films you've ever seen? And they may very well be secularly created because let's face it, the Oscar winner for Best Picture I think in 1980 was Chariots of Fire, and that could clearly be seen as a faith-based film, and an atheist producer. So the storytelling is what matters, not who wrote it or under the auspices of Christian or faith-based. But what would you say to you is the greatest faith-based film ever made, whether it's something like you said, man, I wish I would have written that, or you just feel like this is what it should look like when that film is said we're wrapped and the editing is finished and it's out in the marketplace. Holy smoke, they nailed it. What is the greatest faith-based film of all time from Sean Paul Murphy's perspective? Hey guys, I'm interrupting my own interview. If you want the answer that you haven't heard yet, go to bradstein.com and join one of the 3 tiers. It is the militia of the mind, it is the warrior level, or it is the special forces. And then you'll get all kinds of special content and bonus answers to make you smarter than you could ever imagine. Go there now. Jump on and join. Well, listen, Sean, again, I'm grateful that I got to get you on. Obviously, you were somebody I wanted on for quite a while, and I'm glad it worked out. And I love what you have to do. I always have had great time with conversations with you. We've had some all over the map conversations over the years for different reasons. But one thing about it is I've always respected your faith and that it's important to you, but also to do it at the highest levels of professionalism. And that's a great asset. The body needs people like you to represent well. And I hope I've tried to do that as a comic or as an actor or whatever I've ended up in. And I'm grateful that there's fellow brothers in the faith trying to do the yeoman's work, while we still have a little time left on earth. So thank you so much for that. We'll have you on again, man. I'm sure people are going to
And
love it.
I do want to take the thing that I want to say that one thing I always admired about you, I know more in some ways about your story than you've probably brought forward in your things, is that I was always impressed by the fact that you were always very ethical in a very difficult circumstance. You are, and sometimes when I've had decisions to make because I admire you and what you did, like whether to take a certain deal for a series. And, I called and said, well, what do you think about this?
Mm.
Because, I know I can trust you and I know you're a man of ethics and values as well.
Wow.
So I do want to point that out. This is, even if this was somebody else's podcast and we were talking about Brad Stein, I would still say it. No, I'm just not saying that because you're here.
Well, that's very kind, and I do appreciate it. I really do, because I hope that if I guess I kind of remember those conversations a little bit. I don't remember the details so much, but I hope that I was helpful, and I hope it at least gave you another way to think that was helpful to your decision making. But that, again, that's the body, brother. We all have our strengths, our weaknesses, and we certainly need to lean on each other sometimes, especially with people who've gone down a path first that
Yeah.
might be help direct us a little bit and help us, because sometimes you get blindsided by life and you don't know what to do and you don't have a perspective to say, oh, I've done this before, I guess I'll know. You don't. And
Yeah.
as you know more than anybody, there's moments that happen sometimes that are so unexpected and emotionally crushing that they're hard to think objectively. You just don't know what to do. And so, but we've gone through that together and we've come out the other side. So
Yeah, we have.
hopefully we'll continue. We should continue to discuss some of your projects and so forth. Who knows? Maybe we can do something together down the road. But either way, folks, this is Sean Paul Murphy. Go look him up on IMDb to see all the stuff he has done. He's also edited and been on a lot of TV shows and so forth.
Hundreds of hours of
Yeah.
reality programming I've had.
Reality programming that you guys will have heard of and have watched, I promise. And he was the editor on that. So he really is a great, talented man who also is a believer in Christ. So you could learn a lot from him. Be his friend on Facebook, find out ways to contact
Twitter,
him.
Instagram.
Instagram. He's
Check
out
out
there.
my YouTube channel because I've been putting all my music up there.
Oh, great. Yeah, yeah.
If you want to
So,
know me, listen to my songs because that's the purest like heart stuff up there.
amen. Well, folks, that is Sean Paul Murphy. We'll have him back on. Keep him in your prayers. Remember, and remember well, if they ever tell you you're politically incorrect, always say thank you for the compliment. The greatest thing you can be is a truth teller. As Christians, we seem to be the last truth tellers on earth. And me, a comic, actor, author, have done a few things, tried to ply my trade the best I could. But here on my podcast world, the Brad Stein has issues. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do, which is what? Put the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.